Pro Cannabis Media programming and PCM TV is supported by Revolutionary Clinics, Massachusetts #1 medical dispensary where the patient comes first, and by Salient Systems for Video Surveillance. You've got regulations, Salient has solutions for your security needs. And by Accounting Buds, your #1 CPA specialist for the cannabis industry. And by Artery Pay, easy, cheap, fun, and legal, just like cannabis should be.
And thanks for joining us. Welcome. It's another Friday afternoon, and here we are live on the Green Rush. We've got a pretty good show for you today. We had to pivot. We're looking to do what I think is going to be a great show within the next couple of weeks to do a deeper dive into what's going on with Visa, their notice to the industry that these cashless ATMs can't be used. We're going to bring in a few experts who can tell us where the lines are. Apparently, there are a lot of major players with cashless ATMs, and as we saw with these, people go to jail for these kind of things, and Visa seems to be cranking up the heat. But we're still assembling the guest panel for that. So today we're going to take a deep dive into a slice of social equity, and that slice is we're going to talk with Blake Mensing and a number of players in the social equity space about some alternative approaches to making a social equity program work, and not necessarily at the state level, but something that can work for the operators, the folks who put it together, the social equity team, as well as the investors. And as often is the case, I'm very pleased to be joined with my co-host, Curt Dalton of Cannabis.net. And I think we've got Blake Mensing already in with us, but Curt, let me flip it over to you for a minute.
Yeah, always a pleasure, David. Glad to be on the show. Excited about this week. I think social equity is a subject that's on everybody's kind of tip of their tongue in the cannabis industry. How do we do it right? I mean, you're seeing California trying to get it right, Massachusetts. So it's going to be a really interesting discussion about how you just can't give out a piece of paper and hope for the best. You know, there's a lot more to a business and a lot more to developing, especially a new business like cannabis, than just handing someone a piece of paper and saying good luck. So can't wait to get started with Blake.
Great. Blake, introduce I think you've been with us once or twice before, but for the audience, tell them who you are.
Sure. I'm Blake Mensing. I'm a cannabis attorney, cannabis entrepreneur, and cannabis enthusiast. So I've been helping folks get licensed in Massachusetts, about 99% on the adult use side, since that became a thing here. And there's a lot of great language and sort of the premise for legalization was partially got across the finish line on the promise of restorative social justice and sort of meaningful participation for folks who had been most harmed by the drug war. So there's a lot of hortatory language that sounds great. And then you look into the numbers in terms of actual participation and representation in the industry, and it is objectively not great. So one of the reasons that is, as Curt said, a piece of paper that says you have certain rights or exclusive, access to license types or what have you, don't move the needle unless you have, a financial partner that buys into that. You have a landlord that buys into that. You have a town that buys into that. So yeah, just seeing firsthand some of the meetings, even just between investors and social equity folks or economic empowerment folks, there's just been a sort of general reluctance to sort of fit the regulatory rules where someone to benefit from the various sort of layers of status you might hold on the equity side, that minimum equity percentage for those folks would be 51%. So the people who are in the business of writing 6- and 7-figure checks, are a little leery because, hey, I don't know this person unless they happen to, have a longstanding relationship. So that sort of spawned, to my knowledge, a unique structure that David and I are pursuing together, which I'm happy to get into a little bit of the details and some of the rationale behind it, if you'd like.
Well, we'll do that in a few minutes, but let's just kind of get things warmed up a little bit. So if you've been following, Curt, have you seen any of the postings on either Marijuana Moment or Marijuana Business Daily regarding the social equity plans? They seem to be very top of mind in at least in New York, New Jersey, in the Northeast.
Well, yeah, just speaking of it, and Rico just joined us too, so good timing for that question. But again, it's a super relevant topic, as you said, online this week and going forward as more states are trying to figure this out. But let's introduce Rico and get his camera. He's getting his camera. So you're on mute, Rico. Just so you know. There you go. Welcome.
You guys hear me okay?
Get a little bit closer to the mic, but you're coming through.
Check. A little better. How's this? Let me turn up my mic. Hold on.
Looking good. We're just getting into the social equity part, so good timing, Rico.
Oh, nice. Call me a daddy daycare. I don't know if Isabel told you.
The snow day.
She has a 2-year-old and is her first day of, or second day of daycare. Check. How's this? Any better?
That's much better. Yeah, oh yeah, that's much better. Now, Rico, you're in the West Coast, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so you're not enjoying the snow of the snow day. You can just hear it from your friends in the East Coast.
It is raining. It's raining like crazy out here. That's why I don't have like the sunshine everywhere around me today. So it's actually pretty cold. It's like 50 degrees.
Cold.
I was actually out in your neck of the woods for Thanksgiving. We were out in Amherst. My wife Jasmine, her aunt and uncle are both professors over at University of Massachusetts Amherst. We were able to get a little bit of that winter, even though Thanksgiving isn't real winter on the East Coast. That was enough for me, and I got to visit a couple of the cannabis dispensaries and my first lounge on the East Coast too. So it's pretty cool.
I used to buy weed in Amherst as a kid, but
college town, you can always get some weed in it wherever you need it, right?
So Rico, what we're talking about today is social equity, right? And not necessarily from the high level, but Blake's involved in a project. I'm assisting him with it on actually trying to come up with a design that will work for investors. There we go. Who do we have there?
This is Zora. Yeah, she was trying to get on camera. She must be on the camera.
That's all right. Bring her back on if you want. We would do the very. Hi, Zora.
Say hi, Zozo. Say hi.
For a moment to be famous, she's not too interested in it. I guess I can understand that.
Don't worry, she's a ham. She just wants to feel you out first.
Yep. So, what's going on in California these days? I know we hear the articles about folks who are saying the market's going to crash because they just can't get away from the unregulated, unlicensed operators. The taxation is too high. Mm-hmm. Give us an overview as to what's going on in California, and then we'll talk a little bit about how that impacts folks who, on the social equity side, who are trying to get into business and some of the challenges they're facing.
Yeah, man, it's rough to say the least. My personal belief is that social equity is not going to work anywhere unless it's top down, federally mandated. Simply because if you're working like California is, like municipality up, everybody has their own gripes. It's going to be different everywhere, and nobody's ever going to be satisfied, period. There's always like a one little thing that needs to be tweaked that somebody doesn't care about. And if you're in Los Angeles, like I am, like LA in itself is about 5 different cities. You have the Valley, you have West LA, East LA, Central, and then you have the South Bay, and all of them are very, very, very different places. With different needs and different gripes, all against the war on drugs, and they're all valid too. So it's tough, and unless you have like a framework put in place, top down. Like I don't think it's going to work. Just like you said, David, the taxation, like people are not going to be able to operate. They just raised cultivation tax 4.5% to start the year off. And you have a tax revolt going on. We have our own Tea Party, our own Boston Tea Party going on over here. I call it the Green Tea Party. A bunch of folks they're just not going to pay taxes, and we know how that's going to end for them, and especially communities of color. When you're already 10 paces behind everybody else to pay your bills, like they're the first ones that are going to cut your services off. So it's a rough situation, and it's only going to get worse, in my opinion, until you get some kind of framework top down. I know we don't have federal legislation yet, but something state down that everybody has to adhere to. Because until you have that, everybody argues and nobody wins. And the MSOs, they just keep on marching forward. They have the capital to do it.
That's exactly what happened in Massachusetts. There are state level requirements for the commission here to, care about social equity and restorative social justice. There's no similar obligation on the local level. So, I've had municipalities, even when making an impassioned plea of this will do something to help, move the needle. I've had people look me in the eye and say, "Oh, I don't care," because they don't legally have to. So I agree. It needs to be something that's a requirement, not an option, because I think a lot of times you see people just, for whatever reason, not care about other people, which I don't understand. And I don't yet know how to make other people care about other people. That, to me, is the basics of society. Just care about other people, and everyone does better when that's the case. So that resonates with me a lot.
Yeah, and I think to build off of what you said, well, the reality of the situation is this is Sarah's over here trying to eat shoelaces. But the reality of the situation is this capitalism, and you have a bunch of people that showed up to a football game in basketball shorts, right? And they didn't push hard enough for decriminalization, so we got legalization. And legalization invites just capitalism. And in capitalism, you have the sharks, and they're going to come to play. And if you're not you're not ready to swim in those shark-infested waters, you're going to get eaten up. And that's what's happening right now. Unless you force people to do that, they're going to do the bare minimum, if that. And people will do certain things for PR reasons, but they're going to do the bare minimum, and they're not going to do what's right, because corporations, regardless of what Mitt Romney says, corporations are not people. Their job is to expand, and their job is to make money. It's not really to care about people. And the only time you're going to see them care about people is when they're publicly shamed, and they're going to do whatever they need to do to feed the 24-hour news cycle. And then when that's over, it's over.
So what does California have for programs to support social equity entrepreneurs?
There's a bunch of grant programs that are going on. They're really tough to get into, but a few people have squeaked in. I was really, really happy to see two of my good friends, Kika Keith over at Gorilla RX out here in South Central, and then Whitney Beatty over with Josephine and Billy's. They got scooped up with Jay-Z's SPAC, the parent company.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the other thing, right? You can always say like screw corporate cannabis. You can say that all you want, unless you're black. If you're black or you're brown, you can't say that, because that's the only way that any of these social equity companies, any black or brown operations, are going to be solvent, is if you're tethered to a larger entity that can pay those bills. Right. There's some programs, but they're just half baked. Like everything is half baked, and nothing is working for everybody. And what you have is a bunch of people that are continuously asking for money, like every quarter. That you don't have time to really run your business. I know Ease had a program. They were giving like $50,000 grants to companies. Like, it's a month of bills, man. This is cannabis industry. You really can't run off of that. And the price of flower is going through the floor. The price of operating is through the ceiling. And I just don't know, man. It's a rough time. Inflation isn't slowing down. It's something's gonna give. I just don't know what it is. And I'm a realist. I am an optimist, but I'm more of a realist than an optimist. And I'm just saying, like, I don't see social equity working until you have some kind of federal implementation or some kind of like stepping in from the states as is to make sure. She sees herself on the big screen up there. Mm-hmm. You see some kind of stepping in from the state, like making sure people do X, Y, Z to make sure that they are able to run. Or you're just going to see a lot of people are upset. You're going to see more protests. We see a lot of people just going right back to the trap. You're going to be going, that's it. You're going to be going right back to the illegal market, to the illicit market. I can call it the legacy market, where you're going to have better prices. Don't push buttons. You're going to have better prices. You're going to have better options, and at the end of the day, like, People are going to go and they're going to get their medicine if they need it, and people are going to go and get their weed if they want weed, and they don't have to worry about any of the BS that they deal with these federally legal, or excuse me, with these state legal operations. I buy product from my friends that own dispensaries, or they own brands and stuff to support their brands and support their dispensaries. But other than that, like I haven't paid for product in 5 years. And if I wasn't in the industry and if I didn't have the connections that I do, I probably wouldn't be going to any of these retail dispensaries to get cannabis. It's like 80 to 90 bucks for premium cannabis. If you want top shelf, that's 100 plus. So,
and what do you find the prices on with your local unlicensed suppliers?
35, 40 cap for premium.
Wow.
You want top shelf stuff like 50, like
Half then. Yep.
This is California, man. All right, baby. All right. This is California, so you're gonna get the best product.
Yep.
Period. And the weird thing is like people are like, oh yeah, you don't want it. It's not lab tested. No, the trap product is lab tested as well. Like people have COAs with absolutely everything here, and quality is king when it comes to just operating in California. So a lot of the stuff that would not pass lab testing or anything like that, you might find that in other states. I don't know how it got there, but you're really not going to find that here. You're just going to find like really, really good premium product, and it's just off the books. And I wouldn't be surprised. I'm not going to say anything as a it's 100%, but I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of the companies that are not MSOs, they don't have those long runway. So when it comes to their funding, wouldn't be surprised if those companies have their product in those shops too.
Rico, you said, it's not going to work until there's a federal top-down either mandate or structure. In your mind, what is the federal level social equity look like? Let's say we get there in a year. What do you want to see in it, or what would that mandate be to the best of helping social equity if it was federally done?
Banking first. Okay. You'd have to have banking first. I'm against social equity, Safe Banking Act as it is, unless you have social initiatives that go along with it. If you have if you get it, with the numbers like 1 out of 6 loans are given to communities of color before you give like entities that are like white-owned entities. Like my solution to that is easy math. Like for every 6 loans you give to communities of color, or BIPOC communities, or social equity entities, like you can give 1 to an MSO. Simple as that. They need banking, they need loans, they need operating capital. Period. So that's number 1. Number 2. They need business training. Like I said, you can't show up to a football game with basketball shorts on, as unfortunately a lot of people are doing. And you have a lot of people that are getting licensing and they don't know how to run a business. And then they're just getting wiped off the map by somebody who opens up a shop like 1 or 2 blocks over, and they have everything. They have all their ducks in a row. Even if they're not an MSO, they have business training. And they know how to run everything across the supply chain, where everything was done by handshakes to everybody else. So you need job training, you need business training, you need banking, and you just need education for the communities. Seriously, if you really want to battle these trap shops that we have such an abundance here in Los Angeles or in California, you need to be able to train the communities as well and get them on board. It's not just the people who want to go legit. It's the communities too. Like you're trained to go to a Green Cross store. Like if you come out to LA, you guys come out to LA, you can go anywhere in the city, you'll see these green neon crosses everywhere. That's a trap shop. It's not legal. You go in there and you would be surprised. Some of those shops are more beautiful than the ones that you see that are legal. They have better selection. They have better quality products. The people are nicer, but they're not paying taxes. It's just the way it is. So those would be my top 3 things. Banking, number 1. Number two would be training, business training. And number three would be education, continuing education for the people that are actually operating the stores. And then just general education to the public. They need to know the different cultivars, what they mean, the different options that they have, the difference between CBD and THC. Nobody knows that. They need to have this kind of stuff. And if the government has all that information, which we all know that they do, they need to be disseminating that to the public instead of putting a bunch more money into to criminal persecution. Like, it's not working. It's whack-a-mole out here. And if people aren't going to prison for it, what's the point of arresting them? They're just going to pop up again and make more money. It's an endless cycle, you know?
You said something interesting. You said that the trap shops and the illegal part of it has lab testing. There's a COA on it. Is that the downfall? Because the argument to go legal and pay, all right, California is an extreme example at really 100% more of the price, is that, oh, I want it lab tested. I want to be safe. If you're saying now the illegal is completely tested as well and seems legit, that seems like you just took away the ace card of the legal argument.
Well, how much time you got?
Oh, we got 2 hours. Go ahead.
So, the problem is nobody's making money right now, like, at all. And you have a bunch of labs that are, some that are doing the right thing, but that's a race to the bottom as well. Labs don't know how to market themselves, and so the general public doesn't know, the difference between one lab and the other. All the general public cares about, like, oh, does this have a COA, right? And so you have labs that have been shut down, that have been suspended for doing what? For making up bullshit numbers.
Yeah, the THC
right?
number, right? Yeah.
And that's another thing, like educating the general public about THC. Like, are you going to go to a liquor store and pay $60 for a fifth of grain alcohol? No. And that's what people think that they need to do. You think it needs to have, like 25 to 35% THC in it for it to be a quality product. Like, no, people don't. Yeah, she sees it. She sees the elbow over here. All right, so you see people paying like premium for THC, and it doesn't mean anything. And so you have that trickle down effect goes to the labs, and the labs are pressured to boost their numbers, or they lose a client because this flower producer is going to go to a different lab that knows they're going to put that 30% on there. So like the industry's like it's all screwed up, like across the entire supply chain, and you have people that they're cutting corners because they want to stay in business. Like they know that federal legalization is right around the corner, and they're all just crossing their fingers that they don't get caught before then. They know how to do the right thing, but they're not going to do the right thing because they're just going to be out of business.
Yeah. Blake, what would you add to that list of 3 that Rico gave for the federal top-down social equity, what we're going to call it, parameters or outline?
I think the biggest tool that states could be using now, and that the feds should use down the road, is a carrot rather than a stick, right? So we know the feds are going to come up with some additional layer of regulatory process, probably some sort of federal license requirement. I'm certain they'll add a tax of some sort to make up from the losses they'll incur when 280E goes away, which is just funny to me. They make more money now while it's illegal than they will once it's actually taxed. But I think earmarking, tax revenues either from the state level, the municipal level, or the federal level to basically incentivize policies that promote meaningful participation. And you look at the numbers in terms of consumption rates, and then the statistics on how disproportionately enforced against people of color are, and the harsher severity of sentencing. It's a math issue. The numbers aren't equal. So what has to happen is, I think, dollars go to the states and policies that recognize that and give a meaningful pathway forward. So, everything that Rico mentioned, training, business training, access to capital, that can all be structured, on the back of dollars that come from policy decisions. I saw a recent announcement this week that there's a $200 million fund getting assembled in the state of New York to benefit social equity applicants. dollars talk, right? Policies are great. If you can't get the dollars behind them, the policies aren't worth a damn. So I think the federal government, and you see some of the biggest and loudest sort of champions of federal legalization, Cory Booker and the other guy, Wyden, I think, they're saying that legalization is not worth anything unless we have, meaningful social equity promotion in that change. And I think the dollars will get the literal buy-in to make those numbers where they need to be. So that's just the way I look at it. The stick that the federal government's so used to wielding in the cannabis context obviously is going to go away. I personally always find it funny when state regulatory bodies enlist the help of law enforcement to help shape policy. Why? They had an unlimited budget and they still lost to a plant. Why is their opinion valid at all? But that's just me personally.
What's your opinion? It's curious because you were mentioning, that it has to be kind of mandatory. I guess I'll start with Blake and then maybe go to Rico. What do you feel about towns opting out? Here in Mass, we had a big opt out. Hey, the state made a rule. Town said no thanks. I think New Jersey was 50% of the towns opted out. Should opting out be allowed?
I think the biggest failure in this state of Massachusetts is how wide of discretion was given to municipalities. So again, there's no state, there's a state level mandate to move the needle in terms of participation in the industry. The commission has issued, guidance that encourages municipalities to care, but they don't. So in Massachusetts, there's things called blue laws, which just come from, our puritanical roots. My hometown didn't have a liquor store until, 10 years after I moved out. So I do understand, different towns can be sort of differently composed and comprised in terms of what they want there, especially on the supply side. And I'll look to New York. It's illegal for a town to opt out of a supply side license type. So you can't block manufacturing or cultivation. I think that makes all the sense in the world because by definition, that's not customer facing. So that none of the sort of scare tactics and, what'll happen if we have lines of grubby stoners lining our streets? That's what retail invites in the minds of the pearl clutching prohibitionists. So I get that, instinct to give the chance to ban retail. But I do think it sort of spits in the face of democracy, right? When most of the states have legalized through ballot question. So that means a majority of the people who showed up to the polls said this is what we want. So then to kick it down to the local level where, the individual makeup of the town might be very different, you get these, typically rich hoity-toity towns who say, oh, not in my backyard, even though having grown up in one of those towns, that's where I learned to do drugs, right? Like the drug appetite is still there. They just want to pretend like it's not, part of the fabric of their sector of society. So I also think municipal officials are woefully unqualified to weigh in on whether or not a business might succeed, right? They don't do sort of financial math about whether a restaurant will succeed, and about 50% or 60% of restaurants fail. So to have that as a gatekeeping function, as a decision-making factor, to me is just giving too much credence to the disproven, danger around this substance, which biologically cannot kill a human being. So to allow liquor stores where, you can bring your toddler in, where that can kill, your whole household 100 times over, makes no sense when you're comparing it to this substance, which was, unfairly and unscientifically demonized on the basis of racial animus. So to have towns say yes or no to me, it's too much power to put in too few people's hands. And again, people who frankly know jack shit about weed.
Well, it's funny because, that question fires people up. You want to take it to the next level, boiling point. One of our articles that gets the most emotion and passion is, should towns who opted out receive cannabis tax revenue? And the way it works in Massachusetts is it's like the lottery, right? Some towns, believe it or not, do not allow lottery or the tickets, but they have to get the percentage of tax revenue gets distributed and they still get it because it's really hard to exclude them and figure it out. And boy, you ask somebody, if your town opted out, should your town receive the cut at the end of the year of cannabis taxes? It is emotional. That rubs everybody the wrong way. But go ahead, Rico. What do you think of opting out? You're on mute. There you go.
Yeah, I say let them opt out and let them dry up. They shouldn't receive those. They shouldn't.
Oh, I totally agree with that. Yeah, absolutely. But it's not the way it works here, at least in Mass. You can't. It's like the lottery thing. You still get that town still gets lottery even if they ban the Keno machines or whatever. So
right. And it's real weird because it's like that in California too, and that's why I got Governor Gavin Newsom. I keep my feelings to myself about the good governor.
Oh, this is like XM. You can go off. Don't worry. We're not on TV.
Well, he had a $100 million bailout of the cannabis industry last year.
There you go. Looking good. That's a quick change.
You can hear me though, right?
I can hear you. Yep.
Cool. She's over here hitting buttons.
Yep.
All right. So he had a $100 million bailout of the tax industry. Why? Because it's the number one revenue source for the state. And we would have gone broke last year if it wasn't for cannabis. Period. Right. And you can't write off anything in your taxes because of 280E. So businesses are continuing to fail, and only 30% of the state opted in. Yeah, only 30% of California opted in to have cannabis businesses, but they get to reap the benefits, and they don't go bankrupt as a state or as cities because of the work that the people are doing that are going broke, right? So it's really messed up. I'm all for letting people opt out if they're going to dry out. If they're going to reap the benefits of the cannabis industry, the tax revenue from the cannabis industry, then they need to allow businesses to operate in those towns too.
So there's one thing that's a little, at least in my knowledge, unique to Massachusetts in terms of delivery, which there are two flavors of licenses that are exclusively reserved for social equity and economic empowerment companies for the first 3 years. There's a mechanism for towns to opt out of that. And not just from hosting those businesses, but from allowing its citizens to receive a legal product at their home. That makes me so angry because it is so anti-democratic. I may grow it, I may possess it, I may have it delivered via medical. What on earth does my neighbor not wanting me to have something that I can otherwise have anything to do with my ability to get adult use cannabis delivered? Because think about it, if they don't deliver it from a legal means, I'll call my plug, right? And he'll deliver. And that's not an issue. So again, the logic of people who get to basically whine, and it's like going on Yelp, right? What are the reviews? It's people who had a bad experience. Those are the ones who complain the loudest. They take the time out of their day to bitch about it. That sort of ethos and that instinct is what gets people to ban these things. And then in sort of local inside baseball government talk in Massachusetts, we have these legislative bodies called town meetings, which are evening meetings almost entirely populated by old white people. So those are the people who show up and vote and say, "Oh, drugs are bad, I don't want it." And my thought is, if you don't want weed, don't buy it. So what difference does it matter if an unmarked vehicle comes to my house and drops off an Amazon package? I guess it would be marked, but what difference does it make to anyone else? This is my property, my kingdom, my castle. Get the hell out of there. That's what I think. So yeah, obviously I have strong feelings on a lot of things, but that really bothers me.
Then you got like the Scooby-Doo van pulling up with all the smoke coming out of the windows for your delivery, and the kids see it. It's a mess. I hear it.
I'm right with you. That's the one thing that we do have here is delivery is universal. You can deliver like all over the state. So that's the one saving grace here in California. But it is annoying. Like LA is not the second largest city next to New York. LA is 92 cities smashed together. And if you take the unincorporated areas of Los Angeles, like it's not legal there. It's technically still in the gray zone. So you have like huge initiatives, especially in the beach cities right now, to get it legalized so you can have retail operators there. But you get old white guys that made a bunch of money like early, and especially in the beach cities like Redondo and Hermosa Beach out here, you have a lot of people who've made a lot of money in the bars, right? And what's the number one threat to bar sales, to alcohol sales, is cannabis. So they are very, very much against it. And there's a couple of people that are making a big noise about getting retail cannabis out to the beach cities right now, and it's really spicy. These town hall meetings are crazy, and there's a few people in the industry that are for it that aren't the right voices for the industry, but they're making noise nonetheless, and they're pissing off a lot of people. But the people that they're pissing off don't want to say anything bad about it because they don't want to lose their licenses. They don't want to get marked by the DCC, Department of Cannabis Control, or DCR here in Los Angeles, Department of Cannabis Regulation. They don't want to get marked by them because they know that, I'll say, like, it's all corrupt. Everything, everything is corrupt out here, and you don't want to piss off the wrong people and just be out of the conversation to get a business license. Like, it is what it is, and a lot of the people who have those established businesses in those communities, and they paid their dues. So it's this really tough conversation to have, and because you do respect what they've built in those communities, you do respect the communities that they've cultivated and the people that they bring out there, and they're big tourist attractions. But at the same time, like, this is America. It's capitalism. You have to be able to compete. And if you're not allowing these businesses to come in and compete, that's anti-American at its core, right? Anti-American capitalism.
Guys, I'm going to jump in for a second. We've been having a great conversation. It's well past our typical 4:20 break, and I'm getting a signal. We're going to take a quick break here. We're going to be right back. Stay with us. We'll be right back here on Friday afternoon in the Green Rush.
So I personally like QuickBooks for MRBs. I wouldn't necessarily suggest QuickBooks for a plant touching company. And the reason for that is QuickBooks is still a little iffy when it comes to having a plant touching business or even anything related to the cannabis world as one of their customers. What I typically do when I use QuickBooks for an MRB is I don't necessarily put the title of the company as a title that's obvious that it's an MRB. I'll put the name of the LLC if it's not the same name as the company. I'll create a fake name, then just change the financial statements when I go to print them out, because I don't want QuickBooks to shut my customers down or shut my account down either. But it's still one of the best tools out there for a small business to use. And it's something that I use to run my business. It's something I use to run some of the clubs and societies that I work with. And it's also what I really direct my MRBs to utilize as well for their books and records.
Pro Cannabis Media programming and PCM TV is supported by Revolutionary Clinics, Massachusetts #1 medical dispensary where the patient comes first, and by Salient Systems for Video Surveillance. You've got regulations, Salient has solutions for your security needs. And by Accounting Buds, your #1 CPA specialist for the cannabis industry. And by Artery Pay, easy, cheap, fun, and legal, just like cannabis should.
Difference is building a solution for that individual, not just a custom, here's a box, here's a video, here's how you make your VMS. We custom design and custom build every situation for exactly what the customer needs. And we keep the costs low. We have multiple tiers, as far as what you're looking at on the cost side of things. If you want a one-time, where you just pay one initial cost, we have that. If you want to maintain your system and have the highest protection and highest capabilities and highest upgrades at all times, we have different plans for you. But we scale it so it's scalable and affordable 100%.
Hey, thanks for hanging with us. We're back here on the Green Rush every Friday afternoon. I'm joined by my co-host, Curt Dalton, and we've got a great panel, great suite of guests. We're talking about social equity. Rico's with us. He's been with us several times along with Blake. And I want to introduce you to two people who are actually in the mix and can tell us what it's like when you're an entrepreneur on the social equity side and the things you go through with landlords, investors, partners, and the type of just being taken advantage of some folks deal with. Drew Ledbetter and James Finney. Drew, let's start with you. Just introduce yourself. Tell us what's going on with you, and then we're going to switch over to James.
So I am a immigrant to the U.S. I moved here in the 90s. I've lived in Boston, Mattapan most of my life. Then I'm a business entrepreneur, owner with the pot dispensary in Mattapan, Boston. I'm also a nurse by trade. So cannabis and healthcare merging together is really important to me. And I'm a social equity program participant for the CCC in the state of Massachusetts as well.
James.
Hi, well, I'm James Finney, a Boston resident. I've been living in Boston all my life. I am a economic empowerment advocate. Had my certificate since 2018. I've been struggling to get my foot in the door since then. Born and raised, like I said, in the Boston housing development in the heart of Boston. And I finally have an opportunity to work with a group of social equity people in the heart of Boston, which is finally giving us an opportunity to get our foot in the door. One of the best opportunities that's been handed down to us by far.
James, talk about, you've had a number of instances, because you and I have known each other for a few years, but you've had a number of situations where either investors have given you the short stick or landlords, that sort of thing. Walk us through some of the situations you've faced and how it's turned out.
Okay, from the start, when I first signed up, I was the economic empowerment certificates. When they first granted these certificates, they gave us a year. We had a year to try to complete the application. So it had an expiration date on it. So we was rushing to get these applications in. So the whole process was totally a bad process, because we had to get the application in, and then we had to have $1 million. Once you start the application, it was the application that it was no way that a person that did not have the funds was going to be able to complete this application. So they left us without any of the resources. And then I tried my best to get the application done. And then throughout that process, you have to reach out to landlords and investors. And at that time, I reached out to landlords. No landlord wanted to deal with me. For one, living in Boston and being the minority, you already have that issue against you anyway.
It's down on the weed. Yep.
Yeah, already have that against you anyway.
Right.
Then you're trying to go and ask the landlord, hey, can I sell pot out of your place? And they're looking at you like you have 18 heads. So that's a devil thing against me. So they just didn't know anything about how the whole process worked. So they would not give me the benefit of the doubt. They did not know about the letter of intent. It was just one thing after another thing after another thing. There was no help for me at all. And I was reaching out to the board, and they kept telling me, you need an attorney. You have to pay $50,000 for an attorney. I reached out to some attorneys, and they just wouldn't give me the benefit of the doubt as well. I was born and raised. I was affected by the war on drugs. I mean, I came out of the Boston housing development, and that was a area where everything was just like put right there. So the landlords would not deal with me at all. I went down the whole area of Dorchester, Roxbury, Mattapan, the whole area. I grew up there. I was born in 1967. I went through the whole busing era of you can't go here, you can't go there. I was denied loans. I was denied, I was told, you're going to go on this bus to go out in this area. You can't do this, you can't do that. I could not even walk in South Boston at one point. I went through so much. And then now here I am trying to take advantage of something that I thought would be an open door for me so I can give back. And here I am, I have to jump through all of these hurdles just to get my foot in the door. So trying to get a retail spot, then trying to get a loan to help me fund this retail spot, and then trying to get the help to get through the whole process of running a retail spot was just impossible to do. And then I'm told, how are you able to run a retail spot? See, never judge I always tell people, never judge the book by the cover, because I ran a successful hair salon, a successful food service department, and also franchises. So once someone gave me that opportunity, I was able to run these successful businesses, and I changed lives, and people never will figure that out until they had that conversation with me. So I always return back to the areas that was affected, and picked up the youth that never had the opportunity to get a bank account or be able to buy their mother anything or get a driver's license. I played that major role with a lot of people today that has other things that they come back and say, whoa, James Finney, you changed my life. And I still hear that today. So that whole process on what happened then from 2018 was a horrible experience on trying to get my foot in the door with this cannabis thing. And then the investors coming in from out of town, trying to scoop in to tell me, well, we'll do everything for you, and then you give us more of a percentage, but under the table. So therefore, on paper, it'll be 51%, but under the table, you give us the other amount of money because you just don't know what you're doing. My budget was $1 million plus in the food service department. So don't tell me I don't know what I'm doing with budgeting stuff. So that was another thing and a hurdle that they put me through with trying to take advantage of us. And then when I turned back around, the whole area in which the whole area that would not deal with me for these real estate spots is now actually taken with locations for real estate spots. So therefore, it's like you wouldn't deal with me, but now there's a way that you open your eyes, or someone else that came in with big money, is able to do business with someone. But David and Blake, well, this is kind of like putting my foot in the door. It takes a big weight off of my shoulders. And it was one of the best things, because now I'm able to say this is one of the best things, because I wouldn't be able to, you can't do this thing without having help. And if you want to cut yourself short, yeah, you could do it that way. But if you want to try to do it the right way, I think you have to make sure you take a step back and say, okay, I need to do it this way, and I need to do it the right way. See, there's the difference between James Finney and I'm a different person. I've been there already. So people are trying to get where I've been already. So it's like, I want to make sure I do it the right way. And I'm glad I'm working with David and Blake, because this is the best thing that happened to me, because it hasn't treated me fairly at all. You put my name in the paper telling me I'm one of the first cannabises that's opening up, but you never followed up with that. And I find I was very hurt by that. So CCC did that to me, say that I was one of the first cannabis that was going to be opening up. And then you never followed up with me. So you could have followed up with me and saying, what happened? We reopened your application. Let's fix what happened, because we put you in the paper. We spoke of you, and we want to help you so we can make sure we make that dream come true. And I just felt that I was just not helped at all. So now I feel like I'm being helped and put there. So
That's awesome.
Sorry
No,
for
that's
talking so much. I make it sound like Blake now. Blake say he talks about once I get
I was gonna say, see, Rico, we have corruption out here too. Don't worry.
Once I get going, forget about it.
No, Drew, you heard James talk about kind of what he ran into. Walk us to the point where you got your letter, and kind of, did you have a similar experience, or kind of how did you get to this day?
So I came in a little bit late in the cannabis space in Boston and in Massachusetts in general. So all the hurdles, social equity cohort 1 and 2 had already happened. I'm part of social equity cohort 3. They haven't even put the program together yet. So when I jumped in, it was just a matter of trying to figure out who's who, what's what, and what are the rules. So myself being the COO of the pod, and our CEO being a Boston equity applicant, we had a unique advantage to try to look for a location. I think one of the biggest missteps in Massachusetts is the power they've given not only municipalities, Blake, as you mentioned earlier in the show, but also landlords. Landlords are the death of social equity applicants because these properties can't necessarily have mortgages. They have all these limits on what they can be like or who can own them. And a lot of people of color don't have those connections. We don't have these long-standing commercial properties that are just kind of hanging around and our aunt or uncle owns and they let it kind of get run down and we're trying to use. So trying to find a good landlord has probably been the biggest challenge. We've gone through, oh my gosh, a lot of conversations in different municipalities. There's corruption at the municipal level where you can't even get in to talk to the people who are running the cannabis programs at that municipality. And then there's also landlords that hear cannabis and all of a sudden the ching, ching, ching goes up, not realizing that although our market is young and it's early in our market, this eventually will plateau. Nobody's going to be making hundreds of millions of dollars per store in like the next 5 or 10 years. So
That's Rico, yeah.
Like, I don't understand, like, I don't get it. I don't know what it is, but we've had landlords that are like, oh, it's $5 a square foot. And you're like, they're like, what are you going to do in this space? And I'm like, oh, we're going to grow some weed. And they're like, it's $30 a square foot all of a sudden. We've had letter of intents been withdrawn. We had 2 locations in the South Shore of Massachusetts, not outside the city of Boston. And then when we finally find a location in Boston, it's still like, oh, we want 3 times rent. And we also want part of your profit and we part of your revenue. We want equity in your business. And you're like, dude, you just own the building. Like, have several seats. But that's the position that the legislation has put us in. We have to play ball with predatory landlords and we have to play ball with people who don't have your best interests in mind, don't know anything about the cannabis industry, don't know anything about projections. They don't know anything about the market. They have no idea what it takes to get a license and how engaged you have to be with the municipality to actually get through. The city of Boston is a very densely populated area and we have our host community agreement with Boston. And although Boston has a very good equity program, which I applaud Boston because they did better than the state. I'll say that. For every equity license they give a non-equity license. So there'll always be a 1-to-1 ratio for equity applicants and non-equity applicants in the city. The issue is that there's not a lot of zoning relief and there's not a lot of properties. And for the amount of licenses that the city wants to give out, there's no way that you cannot conflict buffer zones, you're going to be close to each other, then you basically could go through the entire license process and zoning can shut you down. We've seen this happen to folks that spent a lot of money, and you spend a lot of money going through the municipal process. Just getting certified mail out, depending on how long your abutters list is, it costs us $400 to send these letters out to ask them to show up to our meeting and fight us. So it's like, do you like it doesn't seem like that's a lot of money, but when you're bootstrapping your business, $400 for letters, and then you have to print those flyers in color, and then you have to go and take a day off of work and tape all these flyers to people's doors, and then host a Zoom with subtitles and ADA accommodations. And I think a lot of people don't realize that a lot of this requires a lot of coordination, a lot of funds. And unless you give up some funds to social equity applicants or equity applicants in general, they're not going to be able to even make it to the municipal process in the state. And there's not a lot of supports. Boston does have the equity fund, which we truly appreciate. But again, you jump through hoops and give up your firstborn to get that money. And then you have to prove that you used it for your business. And half the time you're basically just paying your attorney and it's gone. So you don't have it to do anything else with, or you're paying an architect to get some plans drawn up, or you're paying, an artist to get some renderings so that you can convince the community to let you in. We've spent thousands of our own money, and we're still fighting, landlords and people who are like, hey, we own the building, we could just give you a lease, but because it's cannabis, we want a little bit of that kickback. And we're like, we haven't sold an ounce of weed yet. We're broke.
Rico,
I ain't got no money.
let me ask Rico, because California is ahead of us on this. How did California handle the landlord thing? Because David's written a big article on cannabis.net about the Boston landlords. We covered Kittery, same thing happened. Greedy landlords were just taking checks to use their address. You guys are ahead of us, right? Evolution wise. What's the landlord situation in California? I know Blake probably has an idea on this too, but go ahead.
Or de-evolution wise.
Yeah. I mean, well, you're ahead of us in the future. What did you guys do?
Yeah, we're 5 years. This is our 5th year into technically into legalization, and they screwed up. One of my signature moments of 2020 in our virtual world that we were in is I actually interviewed our cannabis czar, Kat Packer, out here, and I got her to admit something that nobody ever thought that they would admit. They made all of the social equity applicants here in the city of Los Angeles secure their location and start paying rent immediately. And 73%, I want to say 74% of them still don't have licensing.
Yeah.
And you had a bunch of people, so you have it's about 2 classes of people that are BIPOC people, so Black and brown people that are in the social equity realm. That's another thing. We don't have affirmative action in California, so you cannot legally benefit communities of color. So you have all this gentrification that's happened here. So you have a bunch of rich white people that qualify for social equity too, because you're within a certain zip code, right? I live in South Central, LA, but ongoing joke I have with my neighbors over here is we got a 1-to-1 ratio now of white people to crackheads. Right? we got all these white people moving in here, and guess what? They qualify too, right?
Yeah.
So you have those people that 100% can afford absolutely everything. They're just sitting on the licenses. And then you have people in the Black communities or the brown communities. You either are trying to get out of the trap situation, you're trying to do some legal stuff and actually have a legacy for your children and all that, or you have people that may have left the corporate world. And you might have had a couple of $100,000 saved up, and you think oh, this is a lot of money. I'm going to be good. I can actually have at least a decent start in this. 3 years later, you still don't have anything.
You're paying rent. That's all you're doing for 3 years.
And just like Drew was saying, they have these exorbitant fees. They have those here too, as well. In the green zone properties, there's plenty of them here because LA is so vast. But you're paying $40-$50 per square foot in these places, and you have people that have burned through $250,000 of cash, and they haven't even opened yet.
Yeah.
So it's all messed up, and this is what we were saying before James and Drew joined us in the conversation. You have to have some kind of framework that's top down that everybody has to play by those rules, or you have municipalities that are just doing what the hell they want, and you have people that are entering the market on loopholes. They're entering the market here in California because I live in a 90043 South Central Lamert Park resident. I can apply for social equity, and you're flush with cash, and there's nothing you can do about it. So until you have something in place saying this is what it is and this is what it's not, so everybody plays by those same base rules, everybody's getting screwed over. And James, I applaud you, brother, to go through all of that stuff. And I tell all my homeboys and homegirls out here, I will never, in the legal realm, I would never touch the plant because I see what it does to people. If you make it to a certain cannabis industry right now is like politics. You make it to a certain level, you've done some dirt. Period. like in the legal cannabis realm. You have people that are they're squeaking through. Like I was saying, my good friends like Whitney Beatty and Kika Keith out here, Gorilla RX and Josephine and Billy's, they made it through. But they're like that's two of thousands that have squeaked through. And guess what? Those people who've made it through, they're gonna be for safe banking, right? They're gonna be for that because we're in, But you have all these people who have not gotten in that they're just ass out of luck, and nobody's doing anything to help them. There's no financial relief, there's no social relief, there's no community support behind them, and you have all these social equity applicants that have been vying for these licenses now 3-4 years, and they're starting to fight at each other. And you have a ton of people. When I was going to these city hall meetings, when I was marching in the streets and everything, there was hundreds of us at every city hall meeting. Every single time. When I say hundreds, I'm saying like 300, 400, 500 people. The last one that they did virtually for the DCR, there's 12 people on that Zoom. A lot of people have just dropped out and they've gone back to the trap, or they just gave up. Like they're already broke. So you come in this trying to make money, and a lot of them, they're realistic. They're like, oh, I'm not going to be making uber millions of dollars. I just want to make some to have a little scratch to leave my kids, right? And they don't have that.
It's funny you just said that, because there was just an article today that was just released. California awarded $100 million to support the local marijuana business developments. Did you see that?
It's bullshit.
I was just gonna say, Rico, where does that $100 million go? What do you think's gonna happen? You just said bullshit. So go ahead.
It's funny.
Right,
it's crazy because it just popped up, and it just tells me that people are listening on our phone calls. But this thing just popped up and saying that they're trying to award $100 million.
Oh, wait, Rico, you just said bullshit. So I want to know why. I'm calling your bullshit. Go ahead.
Oh, there's a bunch of different levers being pulled here, right? So you got to know, like on the broad scale, it's an election year, right? So Gavin Newsom's going to do what he can to appease certain people, give them the lip service they need. Like $100 million really is nothing. When you have all of the licenses that we have, you start splitting throughout it for everybody along. And in California, we have LA is the only place with like vertical licenses. So like everywhere else, you're taxed every step of the supply chain. Everybody is fighting against each other. There's different costs across that supply chain too. And if you would spread out whatever that money is, I guarantee 50%, 60% of those people don't even qualify to have those funds, and then it just disappears. And every time you ask Gavin Newsom, where's that money go? There's another project that he has to handle, and he doesn't want to answer those questions. DCR here in LA, they don't want to answer those questions. Where is this money going? Like all this tax revenue, if California's number one revenue source was the cannabis industry over the last 2 years, the only reason the state didn't go bankrupt last year was the cannabis industry. Where is that revenue going? Our roads are absolutely dog shit. Like these cops are apparently raiding people and everything. They're raiding people with licenses. They're raiding like the legal operators. And you see like there's trap shops everywhere out here. They're not doing anything with that. Like every now and again, you see the big news, like, out in Adelanto, they found this like massive grow with, I don't know, thousands of pounds of weed and everything. That's few and far in between. They're not doing anything, and they're allowing the market to cannibalize itself. Period. And so what's going to happen next? Like the MSOs will just come in and take over everything. Period. That is the long game. Like I love what you're doing, James. I love what you're doing, Drew. I love my people out here that have made it through. But that's not
I totally agree with you, because I say the same thing, because I keep my son humble. I make him go down on the places called Southampton Street down in the Boston area. And that place down there is horrible. I had him go down there yesterday to do a little volunteer service, and there's no way that they should have to suffer in that homeless area down there on the streets. And then I read the amount of money and revenue that cannabis brought in Boston area last year, and I like why is people living on the street, and it just doesn't make sense on how that is, and it's just I don't understand it. I just don't get it. But I don't even know where the money's going that we have here. All the money that is being made off of this stuff here. So, I don't understand it, because it just makes no kind of sense. My thing is, people have to understand where you came from and where you're going and how you're going to get there. And it's just, people don't understand. People just don't get it. Everybody wants money. Greed is what's taking everyone there, and they don't care how they get there. I ask people this: if you had all of this money, what are you going to do with it?
You asking us?
No. I always ask people that, because I always talk to a lot of people, and people like, I'll do this, I'll do this, I'll do that, because throughout this whole process, I helped a lot of people, and they stole a lot of my ideas. They went behind my back. They went to locations. They say, what would you do here business-wise? How many people would you put in the front of the store, James? How would you design your store? Because when I ran, like I say, a department with stuff, they just took all these different ideas and they just ran with it. And like I said, I'm a creator, so you can steal all my ideas all you want, but I'm going to recreate all the ideas all over again, because that's what I do. So when I ask people, you'll do anything to get where you need to go, but when you get there, what are you going to do with it? And is it going to make you happy? Because I've been there already. I've been in 32 different countries, and I'll tell you, United States don't appreciate anything that they get. The other countries that I've been to appreciate it. And right now, everybody's trying to get this marijuana thing. But at the end, we're not even seeing the whole picture of how we're going to get there and how we appreciate it. And like you say, they did not think about this whole thing and how to structure this whole entire thing at the beginning before they said, okay, let's just legalize this. Right. Because now we're all behind this 8-ball thing, and we're trying to play catch up. They're trying to play catch up with us from 2018 with the economic empowerment people that were just thrown away. They just threw us away. Oh, you got the certificate. So we was going around trying to be proud people. We got these certificates. I thought I was going to be able to help all the little kids that grew up like me in the projects and would be able to change more lives than I already changed before. Because they say, if anyone can do it, James, you can do it. Because I was getting ready to throw, I already done been around the world. I already done did everything I already done did. David already seen that I did a lot of things already in life. I designed clothes. I was one of the best dancers in Boston. I did acting. I did everything I put my mind to. I did sewing. I did everything that I wanted to do already. I wanted to be able to change lives with what I wanted to do right now. And what they did was put a big disappointment with this certificate, because where I came from, they didn't give us much where I came from. I grew up poor. So therefore, I thought I can change lives like I did by giving people money, by giving people wealth and offering them jobs and create an opportunity for other entrepreneurs that wanted construction companies, that wanted dance companies, that wanted hair salons, that wanted other things. This marijuana business wasn't just about marijuana for me. It was about me opening doors for other entrepreneurs to grow businesses for their dreams. They're little kids that grew up with dreams. I was a kid that could not talk until I was 6 years old. Can you imagine not being able to speak until you're 6 years old? So that means a victim of everything. So therefore, now I won't shut up because I want to move forward to help other people.
James, real quickly, I think. Okay, so I have David knows a little bit about my background. So I have like a little bit of like ups and downs, right? So I grew up poor. Went and played college football at Northwestern University. Got into trapping like after that to serve my opioid addiction that I got from college football, and then I fell into a great job. I ended up being in corporate finance for 10 years, and then I left corporate finance and got into cannabis when it was going legal, like out here. And so I have like a very different perspective. And what I'm seeing is you have a lot of people that are now getting into the game that are only seeing things top down. You have a lot of people like yourself and like I was before that only see things like bottom up, and nobody's like taking a half second step back and trying to see things from the other side, like at all. And these two different sides, these two different cultures, they just clash, and nobody ever sees like the full picture, like at all. And that's why I was saying like I would never see where we are in history right now. I wouldn't look to get a plant touching license like out here. That's why I'm in media. That's why I own a media company. I ask people questions and I talk to people on both ends. I say there's three sides of the cannabis industry. You have the business, you have the wellness, and you have the lifestyle side. And it's a three-legged stool. You need all three of those for everybody to stay up. And nobody sees eye to eye on anything there. So I just hold the microphone and try to get people to see what the other side is saying, period. Because there is a path forward, and there is a way that we can move forward. There is a way that we all can reach the finish line, but not the way things are fragmented right now. We're all in our own silos, period. And I try to get my trapper. I got a lot of friends in the trap. And I try to get them to see like federal legalization is coming quicker than you know. Like the game's over for you. Do you want to go forward on the legal side? You don't have to touch the plant, like if you don't want to deal with the pain right now. And then you have like people that are in it right now. They're just suffering, and they either sell their soul and a huge chunk of their business to make it to that next level, or they just drop out and they're like, oh yeah, I'm not dealing with that anymore. But we got to work together. Like these corporations, they have to work with people on the ground. The people on the ground, you have to stop throwing rocks in this glass house because we chose legalization over decriminalization. All right, that ship has sailed. You can't put that toothpaste back in the tube now. That we all have to go forward, and if we all want to win and not be wiped out by the biggest, I'm not talking about like the big MSOs right now. I'm talking about big tobacco, big alcohol, these global companies and these giant political structures. If you don't want us all to get wiped out, we have to work together, period. And I don't know what it's going to take though. Like what I try to do is I just try to connect people as much as I can and try to get them to see things from the other side of the road, and hopefully they can make the connection they need to go forward. But when you have people saying like we were saying earlier, like screw corporate cannabis, I'm like, not if you're black. not if you're black or brown, because that's the only way we're going to get in the game.
yeah, because we're not sticking together to do it. David and Blake, right. That's the best opportunity.
Because your story is not as good as mine, right? Like I'm saying this hypothetically, right?
You're right.
Is mine. Like I was hurt more than you were hurt, so I need to be heard first. I need to get mine first. Like screw this other person. I need to get mine first.
Yeah, and that's sad because that's the way some people think. Oh, I got to get this. I got to get that. No, we work together. We work all side by side. You lift me up. I lift you up, because that's the way it's supposed to work. And
you can't do that in this hyperinflationary environment that we're in. And then you have like Gavin Newsom, you said $100 million. Like he did that at the end of last year. Oh yeah, $100 million bailout. Yeah. Then in end of November, what did he do? 4.5 increase in cultivation tax January 1st.
yeah.
Like you can't catch a break. And then it's just our people were always behind that 8 ball. Like
Yeah.
we don't have a couple $1 million to kick back and let's rethink this.
And
Right? We
don't
have to
own property and don't
Yeah.
own real estate. Like she said, we don't own anything. And back then, until now, we can't get loans for houses. We can't get loans for real estate, for commercial space, and it's still going on. So we're behind a lot. So when the opportunity comes for some, people are going to jump on it because they don't have. So when you don't have, like you say, when opportunity comes, people are going to jump on it, even if it takes them to step on someone else. So it happens.
We need reparations. Like
Yeah.
period. And
Hey,
people,
Drew, Rico mentioned moving forward. Where are you at today, and what is your biggest obstacle going forward? Like, I know you said you're in the third tranche here in Mass. Like the third
I am in the landlord negotiation fiasco. Although we've gotten our host community agreement, we're waiting for zoning too in the city of Boston. Yeah. After you get your HCA, essentially you have the right to have a cannabis license in the city. Okay. But then you have to get through zoning, which is another hurdle. So our zoning meetings next week, and we're hoping that should be a straightforward meeting. And we had a lot of community support because we did our due diligence. Again, my kids play sports. We live and function in the community we're trying to open our business in. So it's very easy to just be at Pop Warner practice and collecting signatures and talking to our neighbors and our community about what we want to do for Mattapan. So that was one thing. So going through, zoning is going to be like, the stake in the coffin, whether we're moving forward really, or if we're not. But then we also still have to deal with our landlords. People like to change things at the 11th hour. They're like, oh, we didn't think you'd get this far. You've gotten that far. We want more. And you're like, no, that's not how any of this works. But that's just how it is in this space. When you don't own the property, or when you don't have these agreements, and you're really just trying to push forward. In Massachusetts, James, you mentioned LOIs and letter of intent is like, hey, let me use your address for this location, and this is what our agreement will look like. Let's draft a lease and let's get these things moving. And a lot of people hold off and wait to see if you're really a viable business, if you're really going to get through the municipality process, because it's so strenuous and it takes so long and it takes so much money. And once you get through that, it's like they feel like they have more leverage because you have so much more to lose, not realizing that I could just pick up that license and park it somewhere else. So it's like in Boston, having your agreement creates some sort of strength, but it also allows you to be able to, like, if I need to shop for another location, I'll just have to shop for another location, but it backs me up. So now I have to go back to the community. I have to go back through the abutters. I have to go back through those city councilors and whoever's around there to give me their love. And in our exact location, we had a state representative living at the street, literally on the corner where we're trying to build our dispensary. So we had to jump through hurdles to get a state rep to be like, you know what, I support you guys. But it was because we were known faces and we've been in the community. It's not like, oh, these are strangers. But I think what really happens when you need to move forward, the state needs to basically say, this is our tax revenue. We don't know where all the cannabis taxes is. It's hanging out in a vault somewhere in Mass State Gov State House, maybe in the Golden Dome. I don't know.
We know it's all cash because that's all you can pay taxes with. So yeah.
Exactly. So that it's somewhere, but there's nothing, there's no fund, there's no equity grants. Like I said, Boston at least gives you a little bit of chump change to move forward, but that's all it is. The minute you literally have enough to get a viable business and a viable application and get through the state, you run through all that money. The money is gone. So I think that really using that cannabis money to do something for equity applicants other than the program. The program's nice. I'm not going to say it's not. It gives a lot of education and resources to folks, but it doesn't okay, so you taught me how to, write a business plan. So can YouTube. What else? Give me some money. You help me write SOPs. So can my neighbor. So if I read enough, I can figure it out. Where is the money? Because after all of this, I have to show that I have capital. One of the things I do appreciate about neighboring states is really networking and connecting with neighboring states. And New Jersey does not require you to have a property. So you have to have a viable business plan, and then you can get a conditional license, and then you have 6 months to go acquire a property. If we could look at that model, and really change the way Massachusetts does business, it would really empower equity applicants to say, I am the value, my business is the value, what I've built and the team that I have is the value. And now I want to park my value at your location, rather than it being backwards and landlords that have no interest and no investment, have done zero of the work, have all this power to shut you down if they really wanted to. And I think that that's where our business is. Our business is just trying to get through zoning and then hopefully get to some sort of agreement with our landlords where we can actually draft a lease and have something in writing besides our LOI, because those non-binding LOIs are cute, but they're not the final answer. And they're not what you're gonna need to move forward through the state process. You're actually gonna really need a location that is ready for you to build out. And the longer you wait and the longer the permitting process takes, then that is money that's going down the drain. That's money that we don't have. There's people who I literally have bled out in paying rent before they can even get the community to give them a thumbs up. And it's unfair because people are like, hey, I don't mind, if I gotta pay for you to hold the building, but if you have literally a trash building and you're like, well, I want premium rent for this trash building, and then I want you to fix it and put your dispensary there, and then I want a piece of your dispensary just because you own the property, that's where we're getting stuck. And I know that a lot of social equity applicants are getting stuck there too, where you're like, I don't know anybody who owns a building, and when I find that person ain't right. We have somebody who is literally known in the Boston networking area that shows up to every networking event where social equity applicants are going to be. And he's like, I just want 1% of your business. You're going to pay me $200,000 in rent. And this is my location. And like, he's shopping for Black people to plug in.
Hey, Drew,
And
I'm curious.
Crazy.
Drew, we're going to take a break in a moment, but and you couldn't have given me a better setup for what we're going to talk about when we come back. But now I can't help myself. The individual who shows up and just wants the $200,000 a year, I don't want to know who it is, but I just want to know what neighborhood in Boston are they in?
He's in Southie. And
Southie. Okay, that's
Southie,
all right.
it's like the Dorchester area. And honestly, he had a few social equity candidates applying with the location. Yeah. And lo and behold, somebody was having a community meeting for that space that had been in line waiting for the one-to-one pairing. So it's crazy.
Let me jump in for a minute. We're going to take a break, folks. Stick with us because you're going to hear some real exciting stuff when we come back. Michael Ortoll just joined us, and he literally has been through that, and he's going to tell us what happened. And then we're going to go back to Blake Mensing, who's going to tell you about the program that's been put together. This is a private program, what the advantages of it were, the way it overcomes some of the investor issues. And there were some unique attributes, but how he was able to raise not just simply $1.5 million, but had to say to the investor, we don't want all your money, and turn other investors away on a deal that is primarily social equity driven. Stay right back. We're going to be right back in a few minutes after this break here on the Green Rush.
So I personally like QuickBooks for MRBs. I wouldn't necessarily suggest QuickBooks for a plant touching company. And the reason for that is QuickBooks is still a little iffy when it comes to having a plant touching business or even anything related to the cannabis world as one of their customers. What I typically do when I use QuickBooks for an MRB is I don't necessarily put the title of the company as a title that's obvious that it's an MRB. I'll put the name of the LLC if it's not the same name as the company. I'll create a fake name, then just change the financial statements when I go to print them out, because I don't want QuickBooks to shut my customers down or shut my account down either. But it's still one of the best tools out there for a small business to use. And it's something that I use to run my business. It's something I use to run some of the clubs and societies that I work with. And it's also what I really direct my MRBs to utilize as well for their books and records.
Pro Cannabis Media programming and PCM TV is supported by Revolutionary Clinics, Massachusetts #1 medical dispensary where the patient comes first, and by Salient Systems for Video Surveillance. You've got regulations, Salient has solutions for your security needs. And by Accounting Buds, your #1 CPA specialist for the cannabis industry. And by Artery Pay, easy, cheap, fun, and legal, just like cannabis should be.
Difference is building a solution for that individual. Not just a custom, here's a box, here's a video, here's how you make your VMS. We custom design and custom build every situation for exactly what the customer needs. And we keep the costs low. We have multiple tiers, as far as what you're looking at on the cost side of things. If you want a one-time, where you just pay one initial cost, we have that. If you want to maintain your system and have the highest protection and highest capabilities and highest upgrades at all times, we have different plans for you. But we scale it so it's scalable and affordable 100%.
Hey, thanks everybody for waiting with us. We are here back live on the Green Rush. We do this every Friday here in Pro Cannabis Media from 4 to 6. Myself and my co-host, Curt Dalton of Cannabis.net. Unbelievable issue, right? Drew set the stage for us perfectly. And now we're going to hear from Blake Mensing, who the unbelievable part is Blake has been sitting quietly and patiently, something that Blake typically doesn't do.
Never does.
So, Michael, we're going to come to you in a second, but actually, we're going to come to you first, Michael. Tell us what you've gone through, because Blake was working with you when you went through this whole issue with a landlord who wanted an exorbitant rent. That's why I was asking Drew about it, because it almost sounded like the same landlord. But walk us through.
That's what I was wondering. That's why I was like, whoa. When she said Dorchester South, the area,
yep.
It just kind of it's like, oh.
Michael, again, no names,
no names.
Addresses, just generalities, because that's really what we're concerned about, the issue of what the SCs are facing, the way they're being taken advantage of. Why don't you walk us through that? And I'm going to flip over to Blake, who's going to talk about some of the techniques that can be used to make these structures work and make it a win for social equity applicants. But Michael, introduce yourself.
My name is Michael Ortoll. I'm a social equity applicant and an economic social equity participant and a economic empowerment applicant. I'm also part of the Boston Equity Program. I've had a background in cannabis, goes traditional, and given all the opportunities that the state of Massachusetts gave to those that were disproportionately affected by the war on drugs, here I am today. So going for the regulated market and away from the traditional. So going through that, it's funny, like the traditional was just obviously so much easier to navigate than it was, it had it's things that you had to navigate around, law and that type of thing. But, there's so much more that you have to navigate in the regulated market. It's insane. It's mind boggling. It's crazy that I've even come this far, I've been down that road that Drew's been down quite a few times. I've had people that I was in talks with for like 6 months and all of a sudden just went ghost. I've had people that I was about to, we're going to sign the agreement. And last minute just changed the entire agreement and, lower my salary to half what it was supposed to be. And, it was, and then, that I walked away from that deal as well. Walked into somebody that had a space. Literally, I spent over $3,000 on a operating agreement, which was a family price because, they're up to like 10, 15,000 for a really good operating agreement like the one that I got for that price. But right after it was all done and the operating agreement was set, that guy walks away. It was, it could happen again. You never know. But I hopefully it doesn't. It happened where Drew was talking about. And like we were there, we were at, first and goal, and he just, pulled the plug right then and there. And that was a great thing because he was kind of one of these landlords that was going to be kind of quirky. It was just, it was going to be a problem. And I knew it was a problem already. And I was seeing red flags, and that's what you got to look out for. You got to go with your gut. You got to follow your instincts. You get those little red flags that's like, what was that? Some people call it their spider senses, and they're tingling, and you got to listen to your gut. If you don't, you're going to get screwed. I've walked away from millions of dollar deals, just because it just didn't feel right. They were coming at it. It wasn't about social equity. They were about advancing themselves using social equity. So, it was good money, and I'm sitting driving around a Lyft, and I got a passenger because I got to take meetings sometimes. And I'm like, sorry, do you mind if I take a phone call? And they're like, did you just turn down $5 million? I'm like, yeah, it's not the right $5 million, And I'm like, you're driving a Lyft, right? I'm like, yeah.
I remember that phone call.
And that's what I got. So I don't need to take dirty money. So, it's a struggle. It's a struggle. But you just got to watch out for those, like I said, those red flags and those things. That something that wasn't sitting right with me was the exorbitant rent for the location of this place that was one way in and one way out, and you had to zigzag to get to it. So it wasn't the greatest location, and they were charging prices that I could have got two places on Newberry Street, So
$30,000 a month for 2,000 square feet, if memory serves.
Yeah.
Blake, let's flip it back to you for a minute. So talk about from not from the sitting in the social equity seat, but as an attorney who's actively involved with a lot of SC clients, like the structure of the current program you're in, and why it was designed that way, and how the challenges it was designed to overcome for the SCs.
Sure. So yeah, I've had a lot of meetings with a lot of potential investors, landlords, where, like Michael suggested, there's an attempt to use someone's status for their own gain. And they say essentially, you be my Trojan horse. This is my way in. You sit in the corner. I don't really care what you have to say. You don't have any experience that I give a darn about. And, on paper, we'll say it's 5149 in terms of equity because that's what's required to benefit from that status. And they say, but you only get, 5% of the profits, and we'll pay you $20 an hour. Just stuff that is, doesn't pass the sniff test. And I know lots of people have lots of thoughts on lawyers, and I share a lot of them. You have to follow the rules or you don't get to play the game. So, the Cannabis Control Commission here delights, I think, in dropping the hammer on people who try to skirt the rules, sometimes in a way that reflects a fundamental misunderstanding about sort of basic business terminology, but that's a different soapbox that I won't get on. So, through my experience trying to help in, social equity and economic empowerment folks, get going. I saw, the Trojan horse deals. I saw the, we'll give you, $1 million and I want 90% of your company, just things that are just absurd on its face. Ultimately, what ended up happening sort of each and every time that I had these meetings is the, rich person or rich group would say, well, how can we really, put all our eggs in this one basket? And it's like, you're trying to explain to them, it's not your company, that's how. And if you want to make money from this designation, you have to give them the money to get open. So just, I happen to grow up in a town with, a lot of money. So I'm not impressed by it. It doesn't mean anything to me. There are plenty of rich assholes in the world, and I think probably more of them than the regular people in the world. And it doesn't make you any different or better. And I think there's an arrogance that comes with that money, especially when it comes to cannabis, when, the people who come from the illicit market, they know how it works because they've been doing it in a construct that's, a lot more dangerous than the legal market. So to discount that experience, I think is sort of short-sighted. But yeah, long story short, the people who write those 6 and 7 figure checks, want to have secret levers of power to pull so they can control their money without truly investing in the person or investing in the concept behind social equity. So that is gross. I don't like it. I'm not telling clients what to do in terms of business. I just say, if you enter this deal and it gets before the commission, they're going to see through this, farce. They're going to say, this is not okay. So yeah, in an effort to try to make some of the numbers better in this state, I came up with a structure both to benefit as many people at one time as possible, to get an investor to get past that. Well, I don't know this one person, so how can I be sure that this thing is a winner? So basically, what I did was did a little bit of regulatory math. In Massachusetts, a license counts against how many you may own once you get to 10% equity or more. But in the city of Boston in particular, as well as in the state, a company that is majority owned by social equity folks gets the same treatment as if it was one person owning that majority stake. So, David and I, and Michael's part of it, and James is part of it as well. We have a team of 8 social equity partners, and economic empowerment partners, and Boston Equity Program eligible folks. So the regulatory math works out that their equity percentage, that we're not asking any, just their one certificate. Basically, we want their efforts and their input and their experience to help drive the ship, because I don't really know how to run a store. I don't really want to, frankly. But we put together people with, the hunger, the drive, and unfortunately, bad horror stories like Michael mentioned and James mentioned, where we knew they got the short end of the stick. Both David and I were social equity program trainers. So these were folks we knew. I have a couple former clients that I invited, just because I thought they had the right sort of makeup to be a benefit to the collective. So the goal is, I want everyone in the state to copy that. Like, copy that, please. Because frankly, convincing an investor, where basically the risk, I think, then from an investor perspective is, well, if I entrust this one person, well, how do I know they're not going to make bad decisions or just take my money and waste it and say ha ha ha? And you've got the potential with anyone to just be sort of a loose cannon. So with 8 partners, not one of them can just say my way or the highway. So it's a truly democratically structured entity. They're 51% cumulatively. We're in the entity as well, but we don't get to give orders, both because we don't want to and because the state law prohibits it. But that pitch, both because the investor we found, that I found, has already invested in a social equity company. He knew that the people who would, say yes to my invitation or David's invitation would be people that we had worked with, that we knew to be, trustworthy, smart, responsible adult human beings with the hunger and drive to get into this industry. It frankly took one phone call to this guy, and he said, great, I want to give you $2 million to open a store. And I said, yeah, that's too much, probably. That's tough to say no to. But what we did was pretty unique to my knowledge. The structure is, say again?
Do 2 stores.
Yeah, well, good, but we'll do that next time. So yeah, we have a sliding scale where we think, because it's Boston, there's just a premium on everything. Our rent is painfully high, and we also hired a Boston attorney. And you say, why would you do that, Blake? All you do is get people cannabis licenses. Well, the answer is because no one in City Hall cares who I am, so they won't answer my phone call, right? If you can't get access, you can't, explain what you know. So yeah, we pay our Boston attorney a handsome sum, but it's worth it because we got meetings that we wouldn't get if I were the one making the phone calls. So yeah, long story short, the sliding scale of our investment basically is incentivizing us to make it, get to opening day with the cheapest amount of money possible. Of course, that's everyone's goal. But if we get it done for, say, $1 million, which is about the statewide average to get a store open, we get to give the investor money back and take equity back, right? That's not normal. Most equity deals are, this is the deal, this is it. And you use money or you don't. So to get that, in buy-in, both literally and in terms of the concept, was hugely important to us. Back to the sort of concept of landlords having all the leverage. So we don't need the amount of square feet that we have for our facility, but the landlord wouldn't rent us, what we wanted. He made us rent 2 floors. So we have 6,500 square feet, and that's too big for a retail, in my opinion. So what we're going to do is put the bulk of the retail, experience, the entirety of it on the first floor for the obvious reasons that's, where people coming off the street. And because we don't have a need to use the entirety of the second floor, which is, 3,200 square feet, we're going to have part of it be sort of our vault, and we're going to have the rest of it be a permanent training space that we're going to offer to nonprofits. We're going to offer to Greater Boston Legal Services to do expungement and sealing clinics. That we're going to, I'm even going to offer it to the Cannabis Control Commissions. Hey, do you need someone, a space to host social equity trainings? Not ask for anything in return. Similarly, not ask anything in return from our equity partners. We just truly want them to use the experience to A, make money to have their own war chest, and then B, when they go to the next spot, you can say, I'm an experienced operator. I've done X, Y, and Z in this entity. And talking to investors, it's going to be easier that next time, because you can say, look, I'm coming to the table with $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 that I've earned from this store, plus the operational experience. So yeah, we just saw the numbers. And again, policy is, impotent without dollars behind it. And frankly, our location that we found, I think could be potentially the busiest location in the state. Drew, you mentioned earlier that there's some good stuff about the Boston structure. I thought it was kind of ironic. There used to be one woman who was the singular gatekeeper of who could get an HCA in the city of Boston, and you had to know her, and it took like 1 million phone calls to get to the lady. Then they changed it to the BCB, the Boston Cannabis Board, with all this structure and process. What still bothers me, though, it fundamentally boils down to one person's yes or no. If you don't get that district councilor on your side, you can't go forward. So, I just personally don't speak politician because I don't understand what motivates them. I just do what I say and say what I mean, and try not to be mean when I say it. And politicians just speak every which way. But we've had some initial good support from our district councilor, and the roadmap that they laid out was, talk to as many people as you can. And what James and a couple other people have alluded to is, I like to talk, and I'm a professional talker. So what I have to understand is, it's a procedural step to listen to all of the complaints that I've been hearing for the last 4 years from any time I go anywhere. James said people would say he walks around with 18 heads. The amount of vitriol, anger, and physical threats of harm to me when proposing a business has been pretty ridiculous. And, frankly, I'm not intimidatable because I'm a rather large human who played lots of violent sports. So it's always funny to me when these pencil-necked politicians are like, no, anyway, they like to throw their weight around. It's like, I was a municipal attorney. I know the strict limits of your sphere of power, and it ain't that impressive. So I'm not going to bend the knee or kiss the ring. So I know I need to shut my mouth in Boston because my instinct is to fight. Because I have the facts of the law and science on my side, but I have to understand that it's not about convincing someone that I'm right. If they've made up their mind that drugs are bad and weed is bad, okay, right? I have to take it and be a punching bag, and I'm okay with that, because the end goal is to help a lot of people, both in terms of our direct team. My hope that model gets copied, statewide, and that we have a space to get the scarlet letter off people's backs for stuff that's now legal. Especially when you look at the numbers of who suffered the most, who police targeted. So again, I mentioned earlier, the credence and the airtime given to law enforcement and legalization is it's really weird to me. How did you not win the war on drugs when you had unlimited resources, right? The answer is because people are going to do what the hell they want to do. And if they want to put something in their body that doesn't hurt anyone else, how is that anyone else's business? So, all right, rant over.
But you mentioned it almost sounds like a cannabis co-op. What would a social equity or economic empowerment candidate who's listening to you now say, I want to do something like that. I want to get with 5 or 6 other candidates. Like, explain kind of the structure, what would draw them in and what they get out of it, other than, like you said, some hundreds of thousands of dollars in experience.
Yeah, so the regulatory threshold about what counts as your license, and you're allowed to have 3 in each major category, plus the 2 flavors of delivery license if you're social equity or economic empowerment, is 10%. So what we did is we have 8 partners, and that was by design. We actually, I think, invited 15 to 16 people to talk. We kind of expected 4, 5, or 6 to say yes. Everyone said yes, which I guess speaks to the people we invited, or that they like me and David. But what that math does at that mathematical level, basically each person is coming in at 6.375% equity. So if worst case, 2 people leave, and we do have a mechanism, basically, if you try to come in and say, great, I got my equity, I don't want to do anything now, that's not the bargain. We want you to help with the store. We want you to help with the design. We want you to help us find suppliers, and to gain the skills that are the tools that will help your next operation be easier from an investor side, a landlord side, a municipality side. You say, look, I've done it. If 2 people leave, we aren't under that 51% majority ownership for social equity. And obviously someone could get hit by a bus or whatever. So we just didn't want to be in a position where the whole enterprise would have the rug yanked out from under us if someone left, either through the unwillingness to participate in terms of pulling their weight and running the corporate entity and the store itself. So yeah, that was the mathematical reason. And just again, I didn't want this to be their one bite at the apple. So literally every one of our partners could get all 11 of the other licenses they're entitled for, 2 under the state law. Yeah.
Blake, let me ask you this: how did it impact things on the investor side? Like have you been in other scenarios where you've had an investor and only 1 or maybe 2 social equity issue participants? And then the investors have they been comfortable with that, or what are the dynamics and what? Yeah,
I mean, I've had a few deals where it was 1 economic empowerment or social equity partner. One of them that Michael referenced, where the guy just sort of ghosted us and didn't sort of move goalposts on us. And I think Michael in particular, he's experienced. He's got a great drive. Everyone likes talking to him, and I don't understand, what the sort of reluctance was. But there's that, something that I think Rico alluded to earlier in terms of need of business training. If someone can't produce a pro forma at the drop of the hat, the investor's like, ooh, I don't know. So I own a retail store. We didn't do a pro forma. We were like, if we sell weed and we treat people nicely and we repeat, I think we're going to be okay. And it's been a recipe for success, even though we have a competitor literally in the same building as us who comes from Colorado and thinks they're, the bee's knees, but we're beating about 2 to 1 in terms of customers we're serving. But yeah, to answer the question directly, people who don't know other people have a hard time, investing a boatload of money. So, I am involved, as an attorney, and I have my skill set, background as a municipal attorney, advanced law degree in environmental law, which is, regulatory stuff that's harder and more, densely textualized than cannabis. So I was like, I can figure it out. And, been a lawyer for 11 years. I've been a stoner for 25. So that's why I do this. Truthfully, I would love to not be a lawyer tomorrow, but that's what I know how to do for the time being. So I'm working on it. But yeah, I think the buffer of the sort of democratically run structure makes an investor, I think it hedges their risk, right? The chances of all 8 of those people sort of saying, let's do something that is likely to, doom the business and therefore the investor's investment, I think goes down, right? Both because, I mean, I'm sure you've seen, a jury, right? It takes a lot to convince people to do something and reach a consensus. So I like that because I think that's where good ideas come from. And I think it takes sort of a unique person to sort of extend the invitation. I think the reason that people responded to me and David is we have a track record of not screwing people, of always doing what we say. And I've been, a loud and vocal advocate for social equity from the outset. I've offered, a discount to social equity and economic empowerment folks from the outset because it's important to me. The way we look and come out on this planet is not up to us. So to have people judge someone, judge a book by its cover, to me is just ludicrous, right? I didn't choose, no one else chose. So just people all over the world want the same things, food, shelter, water, love, a purpose, right? Like there's not much more complexity to it, in my opinion, in terms of the human experience. So
Cannabis,
yeah, that's a delightful bridge, I think, to get people to understand that people are really similar.
Right after food.
Yeah, exactly. So what I would say is if people are looking to replicate that, find people who have, grit, determination, and drive at the bare minimum, that have skill sets that aren't exactly overlapping with what you do. I looking at a spreadsheet, that is not worth anyone's time. So, David and I partnered up because that's how his brain works. I think in letters and, rule structures and logic. And then our team members just had such a great, breadth and depth of experience. We've got, a woman with, Harvard degrees on our team. We've got Michael, who, was on the illicit side and paid the price for it by, going to prison. We got James, who outlined his experience, and we got, a young guy who's just, excited to get into the industry. So yeah, finding team members who collectively all want the same thing, which is both to succeed individually. And as you heard James said, he wants to give back. Michael wants to give back. So our hope is they'll open their next store. We don't ask for anything for the next store. If they want our help, sure. But it's not the sort of quid pro quo that I've seen in some of these, incubator programs where it's like, yeah, we'll give you the keys to the kingdom, but give us 9.9% of your equity as the cost of doing business. I don't know. It boils down to me that this pie is big enough for everyone. So the crabs in the barrel mentality, I don't get. I get that that's capitalism at its core. But I think in particular with weed, it's not to be hippy dippy, but it's about just like getting along and, being silly and giggling and having fun, experiences and making mediocre food taste awesome. And just, it's a bridge to connect people. And obviously it's just happens to be delightful to consume weed, right? So the whole ethos on this, in my mind, is help as many people as I can, get as many people high in one lifetime as I can, and stomp on every corrupt politician that I can, because I don't play games, and a lot of people try to play games near me, and they don't understand that I am a buzzsaw of logic and fiery passion that can't be stopped. So just surround yourself with people who want the same things. Convince landlords, municipalities, and investors that you can do it by demonstrating success in other avenues of your life. This game is not rocket science, right? The hardest part is jumping through the bureaucratic red tape. That's why I'm useful. Do I like doing that? No, it's a nightmare. I hate it. It's awful. It's soul crushing, but it's a skill set I have. And it gives me great joy to see people open and sell weed. And I want to leave something behind where someone says, hey, that Blake guy really tried to help people, because it makes me feel good. And I'm sure there's plenty of people in municipal circles who hate my guts, but guess what? I don't care.
I'm curious what Rico and Drew think, because they're not in your group right now. And what Blake and David put together was risk mitigation, right? Someone who, like you said, Rico, is going to write a check for $1 million. I don't know you. I don't know how you can run your business. So they're saying, okay, make a bet on these 8 people that even if 2 drop off or aren't great, we have some safety. What do you two think is like a co-op version of that? How did that strike you?
Well, I think for for our team, we actually, interestingly enough, I feel like we kind of built it that way too. We had myself, a social equity applicant, our CEO, a Boston equity applicant, and then we reached within our own networks. I have the benefit of having had a formal education and having a formal career in leadership and having, project management experience and all this stuff. So I know people in these spaces, like you said. I don't put any number in front of me, and I suck at that. But our CFO is brilliant. Like he's amazing, and even David impressed him. So I know, David, you're even amazing with those spreadsheets. And that's what you got to do. I have never sold anything. I've never worked in retail. Our CEO has been in retail his entire professional career. That's our power play there. You have to build a team that has different skill sets, and be credible. And I think that's what you're basically speaking of. If you can't bet on one person, if I just showed up and was like, I'm a nurse and I'm going to sell some weed, people would be like, huh? What the hell is she talking about? Like, you said, I've been an attorney for 11, a stoner for 25. I've been a nurse for 17 and a stoner for like 5. So it's not really like, I don't even have the weed experience that, somebody would be like a credible cannabis entrepreneur or investor would want to know. But there's people on our team that have done this, people that have worked with Curaleaf on their e-commerce. That's our director of IT. We got her, pulled her in. She's in highly regulated markets. We pulled in one of Mike Ross's staff members when he's a city councilor, because she's out there. And, those connections in Boston mean something, that really person, community outreach person. And she has experience in DEI. Like, you have to really, you can't just grab your friends you smoke weed with. You really have to grab a group of people that are skilled, that are professional, and that are dedicated and are willing to do the hard work. This is not easy work. So you having 8 people that could even agree to meet on a regular basis and stay organized, I'm super impressed, because there's like, our core team is about 7 or 8 of us. We even have a graphic artist. We have a horticulturalist, or whatever those people are, the people that grow stuff. So essentially we have like a little bit of all types of skills. We have a marketing expert, and it's just people who are willing to do the work. And it's still hard for us to get together weekly and have these conversations, because sometimes this industry will put you at a complete standstill. Like right now, zoning could shut this all down, and we spent 12 months of our lives dedicating a lot of energy and effort to this. And that's because of a buffer zone conflict. And it's like, dude, there's only so many commercial spaces in the city. How the hell are we not going to be around the corner from somebody else if all the commercial buildings are all in one row? Like, we can't, like, and those are the things that you have, like, you really have to build a team and build that credibility as a team. And I think that's super important. And if more social equity applicants would be open-minded to talk to other social equity applicants, for some bizarre reason, again, I'm cohort 3. We haven't even started our trainings, right? But the 400 people in cohort 1 and 2, you walk in and you're like, hey, I'm trying to get in the industry. And they're like, what cohort are you? Oh, you're oh no, like, it's like this like
Wow.
click. And you're like, huh? Like, hello? Like, are we not all trying to eat right now? And that was hard for us, because our company started in the middle of a pandemic. We built our company January 2020. Actually 2021. We're not even a year old yet. And we are in the process of securing 3 HCAs because we built a team that was dynamic enough, and we had a lot of focus. And I think a lot of that, people don't think about that. They think I have this EE certificate or this social equity number, and I'm going to just run this show with my people. And like, they don't realize you have to build a team, and you do have to present as a professional. Not everybody on the team loves to be the talker. I'm the mouthpiece. They put me in front of the camera every single time. It works for us. And I think that that's what's important about your team too, Blake, that you have a group of people that all have different skill sets, and all of those perspectives are so valuable, because my educated healthcare mind is not going to think, how can we improve retail? My educated healthcare mind is not going to think, hey, are projections being aggressive, or they're being, like, I can't think like our CFO. I can't think like our CEO, but I have my unique perspective of being, I was a mom of 2 and over 30 when I first started consuming, and I consumed for healthcare reasons. And they don't have that experience because they have their own experience. Some people on our team have never smoked weed, and it works out that way. I mean, I feel bad for them. I keep trying to feed them some, but I'm just saying, like, you have to have enough of a little bit of everybody and be open to those conversations. If more equity applicants would bond together and think, hey, we can do this as a group and as a unit, it would be so much better. If I had met people who are willing to talk and open, I wouldn't have to pick from my friends list. I'm glad I grabbed a lot of my friends. I mean, 3 of our team members, we all graduated from high school together 20 years ago. So it's like, I've known these girls since I was 12 years old. It's easy to trust them. And it's easy to trust their expertise. But if I had met some people who could do it together, and I just met in this space, in this industry, and wanted to bond together and grow this business, we could have blown it out of the water a lot faster than our team, who had to learn the cannabis space, haven't gone through the social equity program, didn't have any of the connections. I didn't know David until recently. I am just meeting you, Blake, even though I've seen you in 1,000 podcasts, because I literally had to watch and immerse myself in this space virtually without really meeting anybody in person. And then when you meet folks in person, everybody's very cliquish. So I will encourage, if anybody is interested in participating in some sort of co-op like that, that is your best bet, because there's power in numbers, especially when you're a social equity person. There is definitely power in numbers, and you're a lot more credible when you have people in your team that speak different languages and can talk about every aspect of your business. You can't be a lone wolf and a lone soldier in the space. That's the one thing we cannot do.
There's an old saying, and because I'm old, I tend to know all these old sayings, but if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together, right? It means if you really want to, if you're going to, you can move quickly by yourself, but there's more power on a team, and there's research, right? There is research that better decisions are made when you have a group that is diverse by age, diverse by race, and diverse by life experience. So you put a bunch of old white MBAs together, we know business pretty well, but we're not going to have the same perspective. That's when Blake and I would put this team together. We picked out what we thought would 8 of the top social equity folks who had gotten the short end of the stick. I have referred to James Finney, who was on the call with us earlier, as Mr. Short Sticks, because I don't know anybody in this business who has gotten the short end of the stick more than he has. But he's a sharp guy, and everybody on our team, Michael, right across the spectrum, they're very sharp people. Most of them, I don't think, would have teamed up with 8 others. We have 1 or 2 people on the team who complain, why do we have to have 8 people? But it's a great opportunity. And with 8 people, we will go much further than we would if we only had 1 or 2. 1 or 2, we wouldn't have gotten the investment capital. There's no doubt in my mind. One of the things we were able to say to the investor is, we know these folks, they're smart, and we already went through, Blake and I were in a situation where we had an individual who out of the blue decided it was going to be their way. They were the CEO and they owned 51%. And the investors that we had lined up just disappeared after that, evaporated. So this we felt was a good structure, because it's, if 8 people who are smart all want to go in a direction that Blake and I think is a bad direction, we need to sit down and talk to ourselves and say, what are we missing, right? You get that many people, it's unlikely. The board of this entity is structured with 6 people, which you talk to anybody in business and they say you need an odd number. But when you have an odd number, you have 2 disadvantages. Number one, you could have a 4-3 decision, which means you really don't have unity within your decision-making process. And then you give all of the decision-making authority to a single individual, because you got 3 on one side, 3 on the other, and one person becomes the swing vote. If you put, most small businesses don't run that way. I do a lot of work on internal stock plans in the engineering sector. And it doesn't matter how much you own when you're in the room, it matters that you have a voice. And if you have 6 people together, it's unlikely they're going to make a decision when it's by one vote. They're going to talk it through till they get consensus. And that way, the only way to move forward is you have to have at least 4 out of the 6. So 2/3 of the people are going to be on board. So those who are dissenting become really in the minority of the decision-making. I think that's and I think the investors saw that. I think that was important to the investor, because they knew it's unlikely somebody is just going to all of a sudden say it's my way or the highway. And then the investor's like, wait a minute, I just put up all this capital and I can't have any control. And in this program, in the contracts that we're hopefully going to have done within a week, in the event that there's a tie on the board and the 3 social equity seats on the board feel one way, then they prevail, because that's the way the state regs are written, that the social equity has to have control, right? That was one of the issues Blake brought up. He said, we got to find a solution to this. So the solution was, great, in the event of a tie, as long as the 3 SCs are aligned, then the 3 SCs control. I don't think we'll ever see that with this particular group. We've got it because if we talk things through, we get consensus, and we've already started to delegate a lot of what needs to be done. So we basically have like a CEO of community outreach. We've got another CEO who's going to be in charge of store design and the flow, so that instead of the subject matter experts being Blake and I, when we get in front of the Boston Cannabis Board, the subject matter experts are going to be our team, and they won't be simply figureheads, because they will eventually, and not long eventually, short eventually, take over and run the whole thing with us way in the background. Anyway, I didn't mean to talk for that long, but
no, that's David, and that's awesome, because I think that's the other thing we don't think about. When you're social equity or a BIPOC person of color, and in this business, you're afraid to partner with old white people. No offense, but it's just because they look at. I sat in a meeting and a man told me that I want to come back as a Black woman in my next lifetime. You guys get all the goods, and I was like, huh? Like, I'm over here asking you for money. But it's just because they see you as a pawn. You're like a little position player, and they can put you in front, and you know, they can do a lot of things with your status. And I think it's hard to learn to trust. So when you find allies that are really about social equity and really about empowering you as a business owner, then you need to really rely and lean in on that, because they have those connections that you may not have. I'm sorry, but growing up in Mattapan, I didn't know any millionaires that were going to invest in my cannabis business. That's not necessarily where I'm looking for my money. But I know a lot of people that own like bodegas or record stores or you know, other things in Mattapan that may have a little bit of money that may collectively want to put into our business. And I think it's the big money that gets you to the finish line in this space. And as when you're hemorrhaging money all the time before you have a license, you're basically just bleeding out money. You haven't sold a damn thing. So I think really finding good partners and good allies in this space that are truly about social equity and truly about giving you the power to be able to have the voice in your own business, in your own entity, because you understand the community a little bit better. You understand the space a little bit differently, and you understand what the true impact was from the war on drugs. Like I know a lot of people in jail for weed, okay? And we can go to the store and pick it up. And it doesn't make any sense to me, but that's kind of the reality of the world right now. So how do you find people who are really about getting folks records expunged and cleared and getting people's out of jail, and then also empowering brown and Black business owners to actually be at, the best that they can be, and giving them the skills and experience and also the capital to move forward without you, and not being afraid that they will move forward without you. That shouldn't be a threat, but it happens to be a threat for a lot of old white folks. They're like, wait a minute, if I give her enough power and enough capital, she's going to take this and move forward. And then what? Rather than seeing that as a benefit, they see it as a threat. And you guys are a blessing to that group, because essentially you're giving them access to connections they may not already have or have access to.
All right, can I say something real quick? Because I got to bounce in a second here. I've worked with a lot of social equity applicants here in LA, up in Northern California and Oakland and San Fran as well, and a couple in other states. And I've seen a lot of it start off really, really well, and then it just all devolves to a bunch of bullshit. And so like, call me like the jaded one of the group too. Like I do believe, like, yes, you need to have a well-rounded team. That's number one. You just you gotta have somebody that's street savvy. You gotta have somebody that's really, really business oriented. You gotta have people that really, really know the science of the plant. You gotta have connectors, the people that are really, really good communicators. But when you boil it down to the essence of everything, like, none of that matters if you don't have two things that we really talked about today. And that's what capitalism and global capitalism is all about. It's money and real estate, period. And that's why, 5 years, excuse me, I'm almost 6 years into the game now, like on the legal side. And only thing that I'm talking about now is just reparations, man. Like, because like, it's always something else. It's always something else, and they're always trying to pull the rug out from under you. And then you have a good team, you have a good diverse team, Black, white, brown, everything seems like it's going well. They raise the taxes on you, or they change the zoning on you. There's like something as small as 100 feet, 100 feet away from a church, 100 feet away from a school on you, and then everything just, you got to start all over again. And so and that's what, on the State of Cannabis News Hour, we're on every single morning. We talk about that shit, and I'm starting to sound like a grumpy old man in there. I'm like, yo, like, fuck that. Give us the money. Like, we're at that point. Give us the money. Like, you say you can do this, you can do that. It's not working. And then more and more people are coming in now, because Rome is crumbling all around us. And the only thing that is going up, the only hockey stick moment that in the world right now is weed. And you have all, right? Like, we're looking like food right now, and everybody's going broke, right? And so that's all I see. Like, at this point, like, oh yeah, well, you need this, you need that. Well, we don't need you making our rules. We've been doing this. You said that it's illegal. You took away our freedom. You took away our lives for this, right? And now you see everybody else going forward, like America, number one. Then you have Amsterdam and Jamaica. They're the only place where they actually have cannabis culture, right? Like, the rest of the world has moved forward on medical cannabis, and they've moved forward on industrial hemp. But we're hung up on social equity. We're hung up on, oh, we need this. Like, our feelings were hurt. Our people were killed. Like all of that. The real capitalists are here now, and they don't give a shit about any of that. And they have billions and billions and billions of dollars, and they're going to push the price of weed down to the point where we can't make money off of it, right? And they're going to put the cost to get in. They're going to push that up to the point where we can't get in. So, like, what is left? Like, give us the money. I'm all for just waive the fees. If you qualify for social equity, waive the fees. let these people compete. If you care about any of that, let these people compete, or it's going to be a shitty situation, like really, really, really soon. So
we are, Rico, thanks for the comments. We're going to go around real quick, let everybody give a final statement. I just realized it's almost 6:10. When we had to pivot quickly from the payment show to this topic, I was worried we were going to only do about 60 minutes worth of content. This could keep going. This is almost like Curt, one of the last shows we did with it just great energy here. Michael, start to wrap us up. Closing thoughts.
Drew, how you doing? So don't be ragging on us cohorts, okay? I was very nice to you.
Sell out.
I even put you on with Chauncey to talk to, if you remember, and
You did.
she told me she was from Mattapan, and I go, oh, you need to talk to Chauncey Spencer.
I think the networking aspect of the social equity thing is the best thing. I didn't know there was like inter-cohort click stuff, but that's the best.
I don't click with anybody. I'm a lone wolf.
You move fast.
Right. But getting back to also, Drew, what you were saying about 8 people and all those collective minds, that's like just becomes with 8 minds with the same vision and drive. That's just the mastermind alliance, so that's just going to even get better as we start working together, and more we're just going to start building and feeding off each other. So I've kind of felt this team out in the way they've been, bouncing back and forth. Everybody's kind of, jumps, they hand out kind of assignments on the general to see who kind of pops up, and everybody pretty much always steps up to whatever assignment is given, and then it may not go to everybody. It'll go to the person who obviously is going to be better at that assignment, But like one of those things happened today with the design and the flow, or yesterday, and I agreed to, let's do this, and then Eric said that he had a contractor's license, so he, more familiar with that. And I said, great, why don't you take the lead on that? And I'd love to follow and get some more, learning on this. So, just, we're all going to start again. Like I said, feed off each other and whatnot. I really believe that strongly that these 8 and any 8 that get together with the same vision and drive could push it forward, and make powerful things happen. But yeah, alone, you stand alone. I mean, I kid around that I'm a lone wolf. And that's only because I'm as jaded as Mr. Rico over here.
I don't think you're that jaded, but yeah, I get you.
I mean, I've seen it all.
I know.
I was on the streets marching when we went. I was rooftop when we passed Measure M out here, making cannabis legal on the retail side. Everything was great, and we had like community meetings, black, white, brown, like all in between, and everybody had smiles on their face, and we were all good, and we were all friends. And then it was just like chipping away.
Everybody by year 5, everybody started sticking each other in the back.
Right.
Then the original what, 129? How many were there? 109, 129 or something, or how many?
Well, there was, when I got in, I mean, the original ones that come in here just in LA is 185 licenses, right? And, but before that, we had about 4,000 trap shops in LA.
Right.
Not the whole state, in LA. And where we are right now, like 80% of those people, they either just left the industry or they went back to the trap. And it's just like, this is a capitalist society.
Yeah, they destroyed the business out in Cali. I hear now on the black market you can't flip a pound for more than a nickel.
Right.
Listen, guys, we got to get things wrapped up. Drew, Rico, let me talk to you. Any final comments?
Yeah, I'd love to hear from all of you guys, man. Like, please, if you guys have Clubhouse every single morning, State of Cannabis News Hour, you can get your daily dose every like 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. here on the West Coast, as 12 to 1 for y'all on the East Coast. It's really dope because we have 12 thought leaders in the cannabis industry, of different races, different orientations, all different sides of the industry. And it's all about, we have people that are centrists. You have people that are very, very hardcore conservatives, very, very bleeding liberals. You have like anarchists like myself, burn the whole thing down. But it's all about this communal plant, man. Like cannabis saved my life, man. I had a TED talk about it too. Check that out. It did save my life like 3 times. It helped me on opioid addiction, helped me expand my social network, and it really did help me escape something that I wouldn't have been able to escape because of capitalism too. And that's the beauty of the industry that we're in this cannabis industry. It's like it's a cipher of life, right? And it brings absolutely everybody together. And we got to find a way to work together, or it's all gonna go to hell. Period. So if y'all gonna hop on, say, the Cannabis News Hour, if y'all have any stories y'all want us to cover, especially from the East Coast, please let us know. We have 20,000 members on that. We've expanded past Clubhouse too. We have a podcast. We're on other networks as well, and we're always looking for contributors. So tell your stories. We have a huge network, and we need to hear this stuff. Period. Not everybody's all grizzled and jaded like I am, but I just like to tell people like, I've been on the illegal side, I've been on the legal side, and now I'm on the media side because I'm just like, y'all motherfuckers need to talk. Like everybody needs to come together, take a break, take a breather, and listen to what other people have to say, because nobody is winning right now, and if we want to win, we need to have conversations like this that are well-rounded, and people are willing to, cede the mic, man. Just like microphone and the money. That's what we need. Straight up.
Rico, thank you. You've always a great guest when we have you on. Drew, final comments.
I would say that I urge everybody who's about equity to get involved in policy as well. There's a lot of changes coming in Massachusetts, and our voices cannot just be not only on social media or just with each other. Get involved in policy, find out what's going on with the law, find out when they have these open comment moments, and sign up to testify and tell your story, because a lot of times we're complaining at the ground level, and the Boston Cannabis Board doesn't know that we're going through with our landlords and people and investors. CCC has no idea what's going on, and the state legislature doesn't even have any clue about what's really happening on the ground. They see the numbers. They only see 6% of licensed holders are actually, minority, or Black or brown, essentially. But that's it. That's all they see. And they don't understand what we're really going through. So I would say get involved in the legislative process. There's a lot of changes coming. There's election years coming. There's opportunities to speak about what we need and how the guidances are impacting our business. The delivery license rollout, there was big wins with getting 2 different types, but then there was like the big L with having to have 2 people in the car, which is ridiculous. And it's bankrupting a lot of delivery license operators. So essentially just really get involved at the change level, which is the legislation level, and really speak up and have your voice be a voice that can be used for good, especially if you're an equity applicant or equity participant. I think that's where we need to level up a little bit more this year.
Great. Thanks, Drew. Blake.
I think open dialogue is crucial to get consensus, to have your voice be heard and be effective. And piggybacking on what everyone has said, participate. This isn't a spectator sport. Like, the rules aren't done being created. And what I would say is, don't be dazzled by anyone's title, right? Everyone's just a person. I don't care if they're, the mayor or a legislator. They're human beings, and they're not gods. And this is America, and we have the First Amendment right to say whatever we want to them, and they have to listen to it. They don't necessarily going to do what we want them to do, as we all know. But if they have more people hearing the same thing from all different types of people, then they start to listen. So yeah, don't be afraid to speak up. If you're silent, the industry, nationwide is going to look like every other industry. Rico said something earlier about we haven't even seen the big players yet, right? When Amazon's delivering weed, when frickin' Anheuser-Busch is brewing up a THC beer, like, those players are going to swing their weight around in, the likes that these current MSOs, they're going to get gobbled up. So if regular people want a chance at this, where it's not the bottoming out of pricing that we see, you have to focus on things that make weed unique, right? You know, it is a connective plant, and it is something that I think can bring people together. And also, I think there's a difference. Another thing that Rico said, you know, you don't go to the store and buy Everclear because it's the highest percent of alcohol, right? That's what everyone's shopping for, THC based right now. And you're missing the point, right? It's not about just getting as high as you can. It's about tasting the terpenes. It's about experiencing the different cultivars that have slightly different effects on you and the different delivery mechanisms. So, and that's I think my favorite thing about weed. There are so many facets to it. It's impossible to know it all. You know, I know the law better than most in this state. You know, can I grow weed? No, I can't. And I admit that. It's just not my skill set. So just there's stuff that you can bring from whatever you came from before this industry that is going to help you, and working together with people who have skills that you don't toward a common goal, I think is, you know, the way that everyone can succeed, and everyone that I, you know, hope does succeed, especially those folks who got objectively trampled on, you know, based on the way they looked or where they lived. And that just has always rubbed me the wrong way. So thanks.
All right. Thanks, Blake. Curt, wrap it up for us. Take it home.
It's a eye-opening, you know, expose into how the program actually works. Like Drew said, she's seen as a pawn. Well, that's because someone just gave you a piece of paper and that's all they gave you. So that's what investors are going to see you as. As Rico said, there's corruption at all levels. The landlord thing, we got to fix that. Maybe New Jersey's onto something with their, let's get it all together with the team and then you go to the landlord. But as Drew said, as soon as the landlord knows you're already down the trail, you're at so many feet away. Oh, well, now they're leveraged. We got to fix that. It's called a nodal position in public policy. And there's too many people and too many greedy people in these little nodal positions. You have to ping pong to get all the way open, that have their hand out and want 1%. I'm very familiar with everything they talked about as well in other states. So don't give up. Don't give up. Rico and I have media outlets. We can get the message out. Band together. Don't give up on each other. And I'm actually sorry, like Rico said, you have social equity turning on each other. And Drew said, you have cohorts. Oh, you're in the wrong cohort. I can't, if we're getting to that point already, we gotta stick together. You know, you gotta band together. We'll get the message out and create positive change.
Great. Cool. Well, listen, everybody, this has been the longest show we've ever gone. Surprisingly so. I want to thank everybody. Rico, it's always great to have you on. Drew, thanks for agreeing to come on at the last minute. Michael, we talk regularly because of this project we're working on. And obviously, Blake, you and I are joined in the hip on some of these social equity initiatives. So again, thanks for joining us. I know we've gone a little bit past our typical 6 o'clock close time, but as Jimmy would say, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly. We'll see you again next Friday here on the Green Rush.
Coming up on We Talk News this week, Sold, the biggest cannabis trade show in the world. MJ BizCon gets acquired by Emerald Holdings, one of the world leaders in trade shows. We talk with MJ Biz CEO Chris Walsh. Plus, the DEA finally gives the green light to 2 cannabis companies for research, ending old misused 50-year monopoly. Montana opens for weed sales to adults and does over $1.2 million in sales in their first weekend. So, why is a cheetah smoking a joint in a PSA? The National Highway Safety Association message on driving under the influence of weed. Plus, why did Kansas pull Delta 8 from the shelves? All that and more. All of our state-by-state reports on cannabis from coast to coast on We Talk News.
Hi, everyone. I'm Elena Pinto for Pro Cannabis Media, and welcome to a brand new year of Weed Talk News. 2021 failed to provide any significant movement on federal reform for the cannabis plant, but that hasn't stopped the movers and shakers of the industry from keeping momentum going toward the normalization of weed. MJ Biz, the producer of the world's largest cannabis business convention, has a new owner. Emerald Holdings, a leader in trade shows outside the cannabis space, has acquired MJ Biz in an effort to expand and accelerate Emerald's engagement with cannabis customers and businesses. PCM's Jimmy Young spoke with Chris Walsh, the CEO of MJ Biz, about what this partnership means for the future of his company.
Joining us now is a very happy guy named Chris Walsh, who happens to be the CEO of MJ BizCon that has been recently acquired by Emerald Holding Company for, let me check this number, was it $120 million, Chris?
Yeah, that was the purchase price.
And are you still counting that? Are you in the back room?
Well, the two co-founders, Ann and Cassandra, really started it, but it's a good deal all around for I think for everyone involved.
And the premise here is they're a big trade show company outside of cannabis, and now they've entered cannabis. Can we take this as a sign of more acceptance of the industry?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've been writing about M&A activity for years, and it's accelerated. It seems like every week there's another big deal. A lot of it with the plant touching side of the industry, but we've had mainstream companies come in here and there. I've been seeing that build, and I think this is important for the industry because Emerald is a mainstream B2B events and media company, and they host big shows like Outdoor Retailer, international, pizza. They have things in different industries, right? And they felt comfortable and excited about getting into cannabis. They're seeing what's going on. So if we step back and look at this from a bigger picture, yes, it's a mainstream publicly traded company that now is comfortable getting in. And I think we're going to see more of this across the spectrum.
Look at what you personally have gone through over the last 24, 36 months. You had a great show in 2019. Everything was cranking, and then the pandemic hit. You had to have layoffs. You had to move your show to a virtual thing, and then you come back this year, and here we are a few months later after that, and you guys get acquired. That is an up and down roller coaster for you, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, anyone in this business knows it's up and down all the time. It's a roller coaster. Though that was some very deep valleys and now a really high peak. And in the thick of the COVID situation and our business model, as we've discussed before, taking a huge hit and trying to figure out how can we still provide value to the industry but also keep the company moving forward. And so there were some dark, tough days last year, especially. And to kind of fast forward now to the beginning of 2022, it's pretty amazing, and it feels good because it was very, very challenging in 2020, especially, and even last year.
Thanks, Jimmy and Chris. I'm not sure who was more happy about this deal. With more details on the Emerald Holdings acquisition of MJ BizCon, here's the Green Market Report's Deborah Borchardt.
This is the business report from the Green Market Report for Weed Talk News. This week, Emerald Holdings said it is buying MJ Biz in a deal valued at $120 million. In 2021, MJ Biz's revenues were about $27 million and their EBITDA was $13.7 million. Their event in October 2021 boasted over 18,000 paid registrations, but that was a big drop from the company's last pre-pandemic event where they had over 30,000 attendees. The Scotts Miracle Grow Company announced 2 acquisitions this week, but the big news was that they warned that sales in the hydroponic division Hawthorne were expected to drop by 40% for the fiscal first quarter. They said the decline in sales was caused by a slowdown in the cannabis market as well as supply chain disruptions. MedMen is still refusing to close its agreed-upon deal with Ascend Wellness for the properties in the state of New York. Now, this investment was agreed upon in March 2021, and it was dependent upon New York State's approval, which gave that approval on December 16. MedMen is saying that it didn't get New York's approval in time, but Ascend is saying that isn't the case. Ascend is also accusing MedMen of not remaining compliant with New York's cannabis regulations. Grab your popcorn, folks. This one looks like it's going to be one to watch. And that's it for this week. I'm Deborah Borchardt with the Green Market Report for Weed Talk News.
We're still waiting to see meaningful cannabis reform at the federal level in the United States, but there is change happening in the ways we research and look at weed. For more than 50 years, the University of Mississippi has been the only institution allowed to grow and research cannabis under the watchful eye of the feds. But that's all about to change. With that story and more from our nation's capital, here's Vote Pro Podcast's Phil Adams.
Hi, Phil Adams here from Vote Pro Podcast, here with the Weed Talk News DC report. A monopoly that has existed for more than 50 years has finally been broken. This week, 2 companies announced they've started growing and harvesting cannabis for research with the approval of the Drug Enforcement Administration. The Biopharmaceutical Research Company and Groff North America Hemplex have both received official DEA licensure to cultivate marijuana for study. Since 1968, only one facility at the University of Mississippi had been federally authorized to produce cannabis. In 2016, the DEA announced it would begin accepting applications for additional registered growers. Groff and BRC received approval of their applications last May. One of Capitol Hill's most widely recognized faces in the cannabis legal reform movement is moving on. Justin Streekel, federal lobbyist and political director for the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, is stepping down to launch a new political action committee focused on advancing the legalization fight through elections. Streekel's years at NORML have been a watershed period that have seen unprecedented advancement in the cannabis legalization movement. Drawing inspiration from NORML's founder, Keith Stropp, Streekel says he continues to be guided by the principle that cannabis reform is, quote, only incidentally about marijuana, it's really about freedom. Streekel will be succeeded at NORML by Morgan Fox, former media relations director at the National Cannabis Industry Association. $10.4 billion. That's how much state tax revenues have been collected from legal cannabis sales since 2014. Starting with Colorado and Washington state, adult use legalization has expanded to 18 states today. With it, a windfall of state tax revenues for funding much needed public services and programs. As Karen O'Keefe, director of state policies at the Marijuana Policy Project, puts it, quote, this is in stark contrast to prohibition, which costs taxpayers billions of dollars each year to enforce. According to MPP, a significant portion of these revenues are going to support communities and local nonprofit programs that benefit people adversely impacted by the war on drugs. That's the Weed Talk News DC report for this week. I'm Phil Adams from Vote Pro Podcast.
The state of New Mexico has issued its first adult use licenses for the sale of cannabis, while in Kansas, products containing Delta 8 have been taken off the shelves. Over the past 18 to 24 months, Delta 8 products, which are derived from hemp, but contain enough THC to get you high, have been sold illegally in the state. But now their Attorney General, Derek Schmidt, is making sure everyone in the state knows that selling Delta 8 is illegal. Now it's time for the Michigan Report with Rick Thompson.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to 2022. This is the Michigan Report with Rick Thompson on Weed Talk News. Let's begin. Montana began selling adult use cannabis this past weekend. The limited release yielded more than $1.5 million from recreational purchasers. Montana has had a medical program for some time now. Together, the 2 programs netted nearly $2 million on Saturday and Sunday alone. Now, Montana has a 20% tax on recreational cannabis sales and a 4% tax on medical cannabis sales. Total together, the tax yielded more than $330,000 for the state's government to spend. Now, here's an unsurprising report, also out of Montana. Cannabis consumers are concerned that their supply of both medical and adult use cannabis will rapidly go away, disrupting the supply chain and forcing some consumers to return to the unregulated market for sales. Oh, it's messy here in Menominee. 4 companies were denied cannabis business licenses. 3 companies were given licenses. Each is either suing the city or defending the process of awarding the licenses. At issue is the supposed unfair application of policy and violations of the Open Meetings Act. Now, there seems to be some legitimate complaint here. It is necessary to construct a facility in order to gain the maximum points allowed
in the city's scoring rubric. Yet Loom seemed to get the max points, even though they're just renovating an existing facility. Another company is just adding on to an existing building, and they receive the maximum points allowed. Now, those who lost are pointing to what they term as secret meetings, where the cannabis business requirements were discussed. Now, we know you can't do that according to Michigan law. And in the city of Warren, a judge made them throw out all of the approvals granted under similar violations. Now, fortunately for consumers of cannabis, other cities have their programs already launched, and access to both medical and recreational cannabis is easy for them. Now, this is a battle between the corporations and the city, and it's going to get legal. Now, there'll be more to report on this story for sure. And in the final story today, is there fentanyl-laced cannabis in Michigan? Hell no, according to Pamela Lynch of Harm Reduction Michigan. She appeared on this week's Jazz Cabbage Cafe show. Harm Reduction Michigan works directly with addicts suffering with heroin, cocaine, alcohol, opioid, and fentanyl addiction. When asked if she'd ever seen or heard of cannabis laced with fentanyl, she was quick to answer, never. Fentanyl doesn't incinerate, she explained. If fentanyl was mixed with cannabis, it would stay in the ash and fall harmlessly to the ground. So this is an urban legend, she claims, and she's not the only one. In November, Ms. Lynch traveled to Washington, D.C. for a conference on substance abuse, where a DEA agent, as part of his presentation, revealed that the DEA has no record of there ever being a case of fentanyl-laced cannabis in the entire United States of America. Now let's put this urban myth to bed and prevent the government from proffering such unproven and obviously incorrect propaganda ever again. And that's it for the Michigan Report with Rick Thompson on Weed Talk News.
COVID-19 and its derivative Omicron virus continues to wreak havoc all over the United States. Some events have been canceled altogether, but CannaCon in New York City is expected to go off as planned. No such luck in Vermont, though, where multiple scheduled events have been postponed. Here's Jessie Lynn Dolan with an update on what's going on in the Green Mountain State.
From Nurse Grown Organics and Vermont Cannabis Nurses, and this is the Weed Talk News Vermont Report. Due to all-time record high COVID numbers currently surging in Vermont, Vermont Cannabis Solutions law firm canceled their January luncheon and networking event scheduled for January 5th, updating folks on adult use licensing with an emphasis on preparing for provisional licensing. The second in a series of 3 informal, free, in-person events for those interested in possible adult use cannabis licensing collaborations hosted by Vermontawana is also canceled this week. The first maskless event in this series has added to the COVID numbers, including Vermontawana staff. However, their Ski Days event series will be starting on January 9th at Smuggler's Notch Resort. The Cannabis Control Board's full advisory committee met January 6th, both online and in person, at the Department of Financial Regulation in Montpelier. The full recording should be available soon for viewing. Cannabis community and grassroots advocacy organizations continue to relay concerns about the advocacy board members' potential, perceivable, and possibly real conflicts of interest. Vermont's hemp production plan has been granted approval from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which means that the 2022 growing season will be the first operating under the 2018 Farm Bill rules, which include total THC testing for most hemp plants. Farmers with hot crops will be able to keep from destroying them if they dispose of all the flowers and leaves or chip the entire plant into biomass for extraction or other commercial purposes. That's the Vermont Report for Weed Talk News. I'm Vermont's cannabis nurse, Jessie Lynn Dolan.
Over the pond in Europe, investors are starting to position themselves in Germany since that country is expected to legalize sales of cannabis early this new year. A Dutch lighting company called Signify is jumping to the head of the line with an acquisition of a Texas-based company called Fluence for $272 million. With more from Europe, here's Steve Arthur George in Portugal.
I'm Stephen Arthur George from Kai Advisors in Lisbon, Portugal. This is the European Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. Giant North American cannabis brand Cookies, many of you know, looks to enter the UK. In partnership with Inacure out of Israel, the first Cookies branded stores should hit London streets in the first quarter of 2022. The stores will be focused on CBD sales only at this time in hopes of adult use and THC regulations in the future. There was also mention of similar stores launching in Austria as well. In nearby France, regulators now allow CBD extracts to be sold. At the final hour of 2021, French regulators published new regulations for the sales of CBD extracts from industrial hemp production. This provided some very needed clarity around the current CBD confusion in many European countries. That being said, the sale, possession, and consumption of CBD flowers remains illegal unless under medical prescription. Back here in Portugal, regulators are making changes to the regulations again. Just this week, Infarmed, the Portuguese health regulator, published updates to the medical cannabis regulations of 2019. Ironically, many of the updates were focused on industrial hemp production, causing confusion for many hemp farmers. Unlike France, the Portuguese regulators seem to want to keep CBD as a medicine for now. That's the European Cannabis Report. I'm Stephen Arthur George with Kai Advisors reporting for Weed Talk News.
So, exactly how much cannabis can one person actually use in one day for medicinal purposes? Well, according to Mississippi Governor Tate Reeves, the current proposal for their new state medical marijuana program limits the daily intake of cannabis to 3.5 grams of weed. The governor did some quick math and believes that amount puts about twice as much cannabis in the hands of patients than is necessary. So he has asked his legislature to cut the limit in half. It's as if the governor knows the exact amount patients need in order to get the proper medicinal benefit. Well, like so many politicians, their research and knowledge is limited to what they are told by their staff rather than actual medical professionals or researchers. And yes, this is the same state where, up until now, was the only state that could legally grow and research cannabis for the DEA. Wow. One state that already has over 600,000 medical patients is Florida. And that's where Heather Allman lives. And here's her report from the Sunshine State.
Happy New Year. I'm Heather Allman from Cannabis Law Report for We Talk News with this week's Florida Report. Florida's Green Rush has created business opportunities for more than just cannabis dispensaries. ACS Laboratories is a medical cannabis and hemp testing lab who has doubled their revenue every year since 2018, as Florida's patient numbers have climbed to over 655,000. ACS Labs stands out because it goes above and beyond the state's regulatory requirements, looking for over 100 different pesticides and other contaminants like several molds, which can be serious problems in humid climates. ACS now tests cannabis for 13 of Florida's 22 medical dispensaries, which President Roger Brown estimates is roughly 60% of all cannabis legally sold in the Sunshine State. In other news, with 3 consecutive years of profitability, vertically integrated MSO Trulieve had 160 operating dispensaries nationwide at the end of 2021. Their laser focus on saturating the Florida market has allowed the company to keep its marketing costs down while effectively building up its brands. Trulieve accounts for about 55% of the dried cannabis flower and oil sales in the state, according to the Florida Office of Medical Marijuana Use. After their Harvest acquisition in Q4 of last year, the MSO giant now has 17 dispensaries in Arizona and a clear pathway to leading market share in that state. Meanwhile, they've skirted another lawsuit over selling moldy pot, with U.S. District Judge Robert J. Hinkle granting a permanent dismissal on January 4th of the Sarah v. Trulieve cannabis case, ruling that the investors suing had failed to allege that Trulieve intentionally misled them about the risk of crop contamination. In other news, while recent polling found that 59% of Floridians support full cannabis legalization, Petition amendment rules changed drastically in the state last year, causing several cannabis initiatives and petitions like Regulate Florida and Floridians for Freedom to fall short of the new February 1st state deadline and additional 234,000 signature requirements. As for the now dead Make It Legal Florida or MILF petition, it was flatly denied by the state Supreme Court late last year for misleading wording on the petition. Maybe one day we'll have full legalization in this state. That's a wrap for Florida Cannabis this week. I'm Heather Allman for We Talk News.
The city of Philadelphia is making changes to its laws about employees who test positive for THC during candidate screening processes. A new ordinance went into effect on January 1st of this year that prohibits this screening process for pre-employment, but a positive test can still be grounds for termination if you test positive on the job during random testing and can still be used as just cause for termination. With the rest of the report from Pennsylvania, here's Claudia Post.
I'm Claudia Post from Scarlet Express, and I'm here to talk about what's hot and what's not in the Keystone State, Pennsylvania. I'm reporting for We Talk News. As of January 1, in a 15-1 vote by City Council, Philadelphia will prohibit employers from conducting cannabis drug tests for new hires, which is amazing, actually. And it's the first of its kind ordinance in the state of Pennsylvania. Go Philadelphia. There are a number of exemptions, of course, including law enforcement, employees who need a commercial driver's license, many healthcare workers, and anybody who significantly impacts the health and safety of other employees or members of the public. Medical marijuana's legality in Pennsylvania has changed the way police do traffic stops. A medical marijuana patient was pulled over. The state trooper smelled marijuana and began to search, and of course did search, the vehicle without a warrant. This was found to be illegal because in Pennsylvania, medical marijuana is legal. So therefore, this eliminates probable cause and they cannot do searches. So that's a great thing also. Air Wellness, a vertically integrated multi-state operator, is adding yet again another location that makes 8 in Pennsylvania, and they are significantly continuing to help us grow here in Pennsylvania. Thank you. Okay, that's a wrap for our Pennsylvania Cannabis Report. Again, I'm Claudia Post from Scarlet Express, and I'll be back next week to talk about what's hot and what's not in Pennsylvania. From We Talk News, have a great week. Thank you.
There's a new study out from Australia that evaluates drugged driving under the influence of cannabis. The study conducted at the University of Sydney concluded that marijuana breathalyzers don't work and are unreliable in measuring impairment under the influence of cannabis. And this wasn't just one study. Researchers looked at the data from 28 studies that showed similar inconsistencies. In Massachusetts, Governor Baker has been pushing hard on drug-impaired driving measures and has asked the legislator to come up with a plan, but these ideas continue to die in committee and never reach the Senate floor. Though that didn't stop the National Highway Safety Agency from creating a but rather crawling. For the rest of the news from the Bay State, here's Ron Marshalsea.
I'm Ron Marshalsea with the Massachusetts Cannabis Report for We Talk News. Cannabis in Massachusetts has reached its lowest average price since the initial pandemic lockdown at $340 an ounce. When adult use sales first launched in Massachusetts in November 2018, the average cost per ounce was $390.81. The price reached its all-time high in February 2019 at $405 an ounce. The lowest the price per ounce has ever been in Massachusetts was $299.08 in April of 2020, and the price spiked the following month to $320.30. Suspicious activity in a Home Depot parking lot ended up leading Westfield Police Chief Lawrence Valliere to a house on Montgomery Road that had $2.5 million worth of marijuana plants. He reported finding exactly 1,000 marijuana plants in various stages of growth, and this is the third illegal indoor marijuana growing operation in Westfield in the past 2 months. Though Massachusetts voters in 2018 legalized the cultivation, possession, and use of small quantities of recreational marijuana, mass production, distribution, and retail operations are heavily regulated and require state and local licenses. And finally, owners of Boston Bud Factory Incorporated Frank Daly and Carlos Sarno are seeking records about Springfield's cannabis business selection process after their application was turned down twice. Boston Bud Factory Incorporated was among other companies not chosen for a cannabis retail license in Springfield this year, and they filed a public records request this week to explore the city's review process. The request, filed under the state public records law, comes after an internal audit of the city selection process found some scoring errors and said key documents were missing. Auditor Young No has stated despite the errors, the process was objective and fair. That's this week's Massachusetts Cannabis Report. For Weed Talk News, I'm Ron Marshalsea.
Bay State Cannabis Report is supported by Holyoke Cannabis, Holyoke's finest cannabis recreational experience.
Predictions for the future sale of cannabis have now reached $45 billion by the year 2025. Illinois is certainly doing their part too to contribute to this growth. Yes, another record has been set for this year. Here's the Cannabis Law Report's Thomas Howard with that story from the land of Lincoln.
Hi, I'm Tom from CannabisIndustryLawyer.com with Weed Talk News. The Illinois legislature rang in the new year by canceling the session for its first week, and it's probably also going to be canceled next week. And of course, that means that there will be delay with the pending cannabis legislation that is already on file in Springfield at the legislature, specifically HB 4097, that will expand the craft grow canopy size and other cannabis-related laws. They're going to have to wait. And also with litigation holding back the other 60 craft grow clients, they may not want that bill to pass. That would give the 40 craft growers already awarded a large head start, which they have already gotten, but they only have 5,000 square foot flowering canopy, not yet 14. And that is a very exclusive small club of only those 40 plus approximately another 20 license holders. And they are those select few people that really had a lot of news going on in the last week. The big story out of Illinois was that it sold $1.4 billion worth of cannabis in 2021. Almost double the first year operations in the state. And that only went to those existing cultivators as no new cultivation facilities are yet open. Imagine how much more cannabis Illinois would have sold if they would have had over 100 craft grows and another 185 dispensaries, when those should be opening all over the state of Illinois in 2022 or whenever the litigation ends. And that's the news roundup from Illinois for the first week of January 2022. Back to you in the newsroom.
Colorado and Washington State were the first two states to legalize the sale of cannabis. But amazingly, in Washington State, they prohibited growing cannabis in your home. But that might be changing this year. Here's our Washington State report with the Talking Hedge host, Josh Kincaid.
I'm Josh Kincaid from the Talking Hedge with the Washington State Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. Other states that have regulated cannabis markets already allow for home growing, but Washington State does not. However, Washington's 2022 legislative and regulatory priorities include a home grow bill. Washington's residents should be able to grow a few plants in a state that already allows adults to brew up to 200 gallons of beer and wine at home each year, but growing even one cannabis plant is a felony unless authorized for medical purposes. House Bill 1019 would have authorized adults age 21 and over to maintain up to 6 plants at home. However, according to the Cannabis Observer, HB 1019 wasn't considered a high enough priority to be considered in a year where there was less legislation as a result of the pandemic. The bill was tabled last session, but no law pertaining to cannabis should be a felony, period. So if it's not passed this year, it'll have to be reintroduced in the next biennium. Next week, you're going to find out more about Washington State's other 2022 legislative and regulatory priorities. But with that, we're going to have to roll up this Washington State Cannabis Report. I'm Josh Kincaid from the Talking Hedge reporting for Weed Talk News. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, or don't, and I'm out.
Every headline coming out of California these days spells doom and gloom for the legal cannabis industry. Meanwhile, the legacy market is booming. Is this state setting a good example for the rest of the country, or showing how state regulations can strangle it before it barely gets going? Christopher Smith from the American Cannabis Report has been covering this scene for years. Here's this week's California Report with Chris.
Hey, thanks for the intro and Happy New Year. Here's the first California roundup for 2022 from Weed Talk News. The FDA's approved a CBD trial at UCLA. UCLA is not only the most competitive university in America to get into, it's also on the leading edge of cannabis research. The Food and Drug Administration has approved a clinical trial for a CBD-based drug to treat opioid use disorder. Opiates killed 100,000 Americans last year, so not a moment too soon. A study published last year found that cannabis legalization has led to a marked decline in the volume of opioids prescribed across Canada. And a 2019 study found cannabis use led to a 64% decline in opioid use for chronic pain patients. Ananda Scientific announced that its CBD drug called Nanthea ATL5 will be studied at the Jane and Terry Semel Institute for Neuroscience and Human Behavior. Excellent news. Let's get that show on the road. Why did some California cannabis farmers let this season's crop rot? By every estimate, more cannabis was grown in the United States in 2021 than ever before, says Forbes magazine, including an estimated 1 million pounds in California alone. But California's poorly planned regulations created cultivation capacity for 300% of California's demand. This oversupply has driven prices down so sharply, and taxes on the growers are so high at $154 a pound, that some growers in the world's largest single adult use market have refused to harvest this fall, leaving thousands of pounds of the world's best bud rotting in the fields. California, a market with so much promise, is a hot mess at the moment. So what's ahead? Top cannabis consultant Liz Rogan of Santa Barbara, California, says in an article that there are 3 trends to watch this year. One is increased mainstream use. Already, 38 states have legalized cannabis for medicinal uses and 18 have fully legalized, and hemp, of course, is legal in all 50 states. Rogan says there are more to come in 2022. An explosion of low-dose offerings. Increased mainstream use will lead to demand for lower-dose products as a way to ease into using. More new products, especially edibles, will be big sellers. And number 3, increase of medicinal use as an alternative to pharma. More than 3,500 peer-reviewed scientific papers were produced in 2020 alone, which will help to educate doctors and patients alike. And I'm Christopher Smith from the American Cannabis Report, sending peace and love and California good New Year's wishes for the Weed Talk News.
Finally tonight, congratulations to the Cleveland School of Cannabis in Ohio. They unveiled a brand new campus this week in Independence, Ohio. The newly expanded campus boasts a total of 9,000 square feet of space. And this week, they held a big opening with a cooking exhibition prepared by their Director of Education, Nicole Phoenix, and fellow faculty member, Sue Whipple. The Cleveland School of Cannabis opened in January of 2017 and is the only state-approved school for cannabis education. They have graduated over 700 students and placed 60% of them in jobs. And that will do it for Weed Talk News for this week. I'm Elena Pinto, and remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly.
Millionaire Henry Ford once told a skeptical attorney when questioned about his level of education, "I don't know the answer, but I know the guy who does." A tip of the hat to the power of intellect. A nation's formation begins with the knowledge imparted on its future leaders, who'll take the reins and continue the construction of a world's creations. No matter the industry or corner of the universe to be birthed, a world is born through the strength and knowledge of its workforce. The next industry to take us to new heights of prominence has arrived. With hundreds of thousands of jobs expected by the year 2020, those who pursue measures of market education will be those leading the way. It is fact that throughout our long and prosperous history as a global people, education builds nations.
Weed Talk and In the Weeds are two productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first.
Difference is building a solution for that individual, not just a custom, here's a box, here's a video, here's how you make your VMS. We custom design and custom build every situation for exactly what the customer needs. And we keep the costs low. We have multiple tiers, as far as what you're looking at on the cost side of things. If you want a one-time, where you just pay one initial cost, we have that. If you want to maintain your system and have the highest protection and highest capabilities and highest upgrades at all times, we have different plans for you. But we scale it so it's scalable and affordable 100%.
Pro Cannabis Media programming is available live and on demand on our Facebook page at Pro Canna Media, on Instagram at Pro Cannabis Media, on LinkedIn also at Pro Cannabis Media, on YouTube and YouTube Live on Pro Cannabis Media, Twitter at Pro Canna Media, and on twitch.tv/Pro Cannabis Media. So like, share, and subscribe to all of our content, newsletters, and shows live or on demand.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.